Entertainment proudly presents.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
The Never Submit Podcast.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
With your host, Matthew Ciccella.
And what you gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world destroy you?
Join Matthew and his special guests as they discuss the latest news and rumors in all forms of entertainment.
Are you ready? The champ is here! It's just a man! Give me a hell yeah! What the rock is cooking!
Each week, they break down everything from movies and TV shows.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're a smart motherfucker, that's right.
To professional wrestling and mixed martial arts.
If you're not down with that, we got 2 words for ya! Ooh, yeah!
It's wild.
Say hello to my little friend!
And crazy.
They look like psychos? Is that what they look like? They were vampires. Psychos do not explode when sunlight hits them. I don't give a fuck how crazy they are.
And completely uncensored.
Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
It's the Never Submit Podcast.
Hasta la vista, baby.
And it's happening right now.
Game over.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Never Submit Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Ciccella. As always, I'm joined by Joshua Hall. Today, we are not joined by Sean Waters. Due to a scheduling conflict, he could not be on the show with us. Also, due to a scheduling conflict, we did not get to do the wrestling show this week because Mike Moten and Sean Waters could not be a part of the show. So, a lot of scheduling conflicts this week. But, however, myself and Josh were available to do the movie show. We got something special for you. But, Josh, how you feeling this week?
I'm feeling pretty good, man. Did a little bit of Halloween festivities over the weekend. Yeah, and just watching, scary movies. How about you?
About the same, man. Watched a couple scary movies this weekend, which is fitting considering our topic this week is going to be our top 10 favorite horror movies. So I'm looking forward to that. What did you do for your Halloween festivities this weekend, Josh? Anything special? We're recording this on Sunday morning for anybody that wants to know. So Halloween was actually last night.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
That's why when I messaged you, spoiler. It's like that's why when I messaged you that one time, I said, let's pull a Simpsons. Let's do it after Halloween. The Treehouse of Horror is always like in November.
Right.
But no, Friday, we had a big work festivity thing at my day job. So, you probably saw on Facebook, I went as Jason, painted up my body in blood. I took a scrappy shirt that I usually wear to the gym, splashed it with red paint to represent blood, and then a hockey mask and a plastic blade that I got from Walmart. And yeah, so that was really fun. And then yesterday I did a production meeting early in the day, and then went to a little bash. My buddy was in a band, so yeah, so just kind of hung out, a couple of things here and there. And it was a good time.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I saw some of the pictures that you posted on Facebook of the Jasons. I thought that was pretty cool. That good Halloween costume. Can never go wrong with Jason.
Yeah. He's an easy one, too.
Right, yeah. You can just go to Walmart and buy one of those hockey masks or something, But yeah, I didn't do too much for Halloween myself, man. I watched a couple scary movies with my wife and the kids, but we didn't really, my kids are old enough. They don't go trick-or-treating and stuff like that, and I don't really get into the whole festivity thing at work. I'm kind of an asshole like that. I just keep to myself. so I didn't. There were people dressing up like that, but I don't know, man. I don't enjoy. You always see. This is gonna sound so bad, but you always see those the heavy set women that want to wear the Halloween costume in much smaller size than they need to, and you know what I'm saying. And I've seen one too many Harley Quinns that just left buffet, so I don't need to see anymore. I don't need to see anymore, man.
and you got the extra bakery that's coming through the clothing, and it's like, yeah,
exactly.
It's not a pleasant sight to look at. It's like, yeah, you know, there's plenty of other things you could have done. You didn't have to do that.
You know what I'm saying? And I work in a medical like facility processing center, so it's like, you know, it's a desk job. So basically, the women that I work with, not all of them, you know, in case someone listen to this, don't kill me. But not all of them, but a lot of them, you know, they putting on the pounds because they just sitting there at the desk. So maybe they were sexy as Harley Quinn 5 years ago, but not so much now. So I don't.
You know, it always amazes me too. It's like there's so many other things you could be. You could be like a killer clown from outer space. You could be anything else that can, you know, applaud your weight gain. You know, and I'm not trying to knock
Pillsbury
people for
Doughboy or something, man. Be the State Puft Marshmallow Man. You know, be something like that.
Be King Kong, you know? It's like something that applauds your weight gain.
King Kong. Oh, shit, man. I think if we said that some girl in real life, we'd be dead right now. Like, you know what I think you should be this year for Halloween? This is going to fit you perfectly. How would you like to be King Kong? That shit would be great. That's funny, man.
Since we're talking about women for the moment, I'll be the Mike Bolton of this little portion.
Oh, here we go.
I'll be a little more
Shout out to Mike. Mike couldn't be with us, but Mike's here in spirit through Josh. We're hating on women already.
Yep.
There goes half our audience. There goes half our audience, man. Thanks a lot. As if we don't get enough hate mail as it is. Here comes some more now. You sexist motherfucker. You know. No.
Yeah. He said King Kong. I swear, it's almost just wrong.
I know, right? No, but I don't care too much, man. I'm happily married. I don't pay attention to other women too much, so I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's when they're heavy set and their skin's not covered all the way. It's not my thing. Maybe it is for somebody else. There's King Kong out there for everybody, right? So this is not for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's go ahead, man. Exactly. Like we kicked off the show with, we mentioned, we said we're going to talk about our top 10 horror movies. We haven't done a top 10 countdown in a long time. We used to do them on the wrestling show quite often when we first kicked this thing off several months ago. I don't recall ever doing a movie countdown yet, so this, I think, is our first. So it's unfortunate we don't have Sean or Mike with us, but that's all right. We're going to have some fun without them and see what we got here. Just real quick, before we jump into the countdown, what did you use, non-spoiler, of course, don't spoil your list, but what did you use as your judging criteria? What made you say, okay, this is the kind of movie I want to put on my list versus something else, you know?
Yeah, and for sure, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I meant to put out a disclaimer that my particular list, and as when I mentioned before, my list is a mix of slasher, a little bit of thriller, and paranormal. And they're basically based on things that influenced me as a filmmaker and as a writer. You know, and so things that not just really freaked me out, you know, as a child, but also films that I just really enjoyed, you know, and still hold to me to this day. That really helped me out as a filmmaker and a writer. You know, so that's where my list really comes in. And especially horror movies are my favorite genre.
And that makes sense, though, because it's kind of hard, like, for not all guys, but a lot of guys, you know, we don't get that work in the film industry. We don't get scared by these movies. You know, we look at them for what they are, and a lot of people see them as popcorn films, and we kind of look at them from the artistic point of view, because this is what, like my first film that I ever made, Poetic, which comes out next year, cheap plug, that was a thriller / horror film. So I looked at a lot of films for influence, like you're saying that you've done. So we don't look at them from like, oh my god, that scared me, or, you know, whatever. And I don't get scared by horror movies. I never have. I think the first horror movie I ever saw, if I remember correctly, was Nightmare on Elm Street. My sister, my oldest sister, Wendy, held me down and made me, I was like 4 or 5 years old, and she held me down and made me watch A Nightmare on Elm Street. So after that, I really wasn't scared from horror movies anymore. I was like, well, all right, well, fuck it. If you're going to make me watch them, then I end up loving them, and now, like, I'm the one in my family. Nobody else in my family, besides my dad, really gets into horror films or whatever, but that's always been my favorite genre of film. I just think that it's You know, and I'm one of those people, I can watch anything. I can watch horror films. I can watch chick flicks. You know, I don't have a bias against any genre. I can watch anything. But horror films, to me, I just enjoy what they used to bring to the table. Not so much the current crop of horror films we're getting, as you'll see with my list. Not so. I didn't, a spoiler. I didn't put on there, the movie that came out like The Gallows or something. I didn't put on the Paranormal Activity, Ghost Dimensions or whatever that film's called. I didn't, but the older films I really enjoyed in the 2000s and 90s, and obviously the 80s. I mean, there's nothing to me that's the ideal spot for horror film. It's a great time to grow up in the 80s too, because they, every year you had a Friday the 13th, the Halloween, a Nightmare on Elm Street, and the rip-offs. They had so many of them.
And then they were also bringing back the older guys that before the slasher was popular. They would bring back Michael Myers. They would bring back Leatherface and anything else too. Mm-hmm. And we also had Critters. We had
Critters
other
awesome,
little monster movies. Chucky.
I love Critters.
So I mean, it's like. Yeah, so I mean, the 80s and a little bit of the early 90s was a great time for the horror genre.
It really was. I think horror goes through spurts. Don't you think that horror, like in the 80s, like let's say the early to mid 80s was prime spot for horror, kind of died off there a little bit, and then Scream brings it back in the mid 90s. Scream brings it back, and then it dies off a little bit, and then it comes back in the 2000s, and it just kind of dies off again. And now, right now, I think we're in that spot again. We're waiting for that next great horror film to bring us back. I don't know if we're going to get it, but I'm waiting for it.
Right, and I think the biggest problem, and I think Scream 3 found the victim of this too, is the fact that actually, even over the weekend, I think probably even this past week, when I was kind of getting my mind into this Halloween mode, Nightmare on Elm Street, became so commercial. Jason, I mean, there's a thing on YouTube of Jason going on the Arsenio Hall show. So it became
I remember
so
that.
commercial. And then Freddy was doing these MTV spots, and it was not scary at all. And it just became overly comedic. So yeah, like you mentioned, Scream kind of revived it. It gave it CPR, and it was scary again. It was fun again. My personal point of view, and it's on my list, so this is, I guess, kind of a spoiler. Saw, I think, kind of helped rejuvenate a little bit of horror again. And so I think, it's just kind of what you mentioned. Every couple of years, it's like anything else. It's like with music and even with wrestling. Every couple of years, there's something that creates a revolution where it's just like, oh, it's hot again,
Yeah,
it's just.
You're absolutely right, and that's a perfect way of looking at it too. Like you mentioned wrestling, because like right now, you ask any wrestling fan, wrestling sucks right now. I mean, it's not good. It hasn't been good for years, but there was a time, where wrestling wasn't good and then came back. The end of the 80s, obviously the Hulkamania era, you can't tell me it wasn't the best segment of wrestling in history. But then you had those early 90s, and you had those fucking silly gimmicks like Doink the Clown and Kona Crush and TL Hopper and all this goofy... The Goon, all these goofy things. And then suddenly, Steve Austin breaks out with the Stone Cold Steve Austin character. The Attitude Era kicks off. You got DX, and we're hot again. And then, slowly into the 2000s, and the WCW gets bought out in 2001, and the ratings and everything tank again because that cycle has gone down. And you see that same thing with horror movies. So which is always interesting to me, because there's the two major things in my life that I love as far as entertainment is horror films and professional wrestling, and they kind of coincide a lot in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways they're different, but a lot of ways the business model and the way that it's presented and the way audience take it in is similar. You take it in spurts. But let's go ahead and jump into our list, man. What do you think? What is your number 10 movie, Josh?
So, as I mentioned before, I'm going to be switching back and forth between slashers and paranormal. So, my first one that I mentioned, number 10, if you will, is going to be The Exorcist Part 3.
Oh, okay.
And this movie really freaked me out when I was a kid. But not just that, I'm still enamored and in awe with Brad Dourif, who's well known for playing the voice of Chucky in all the Chucky series. His performance in that film is just horrific. It's just, I mean, and he says everything with such confidence. I would almost say it's probably even with Anthony Hopkins from the Silence of the Lambs films, Hannibal and so forth. It's just the way he delivers the lines, and he talks about how he is the Gemini killer, and the way he deals with his victims. I don't know, and it's probably just me. Maybe I stand alone in this. I find this more terrifying than the actual kill sequence. You know, or like a crazy man with a knife chasing you. Where this, it's like he's sitting there describing everything. I mean, that performance is still... I actually wrote several paranormal shorts where I would look at this as an influence. And I remember there was... we were preparing for this one horror short about less than a year back. And the filmmaker Facebooked me, and he goes, "Hey, man, were you influenced by Exorcist 3? I'm like, yeah. It's like, yeah, I could see it. You know, it's like, yeah, it is so creepy. It's such a creepy film, and the director of it is the original author from the original film. You know, so when you watch it, and you know, they say today's generation is very ADD with today's general entertainment. Mm-hmm. So you do have to be kind of patient. There's some scenes where, if you really do suffer from ADD, yeah, you might get a little bored. But once you get to those scenes, and there are kill scenes, that it's like a straight old-fashioned slasher film. There are kill scenes in there. But once you get to those scenes and the way they're shot and the music's executed, and you get to Brad Dourif, you're either crying or you're leaving. It's one of the two. And so, yeah, that's definitely my number 10.
I always thought that The Exorcist Part 3 got a bad rap, because when you talk to people, they always say, well, The Exorcist, the first one, was so great, and the other two movies, you know, they were shit or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you haven't seen them, and you're just playing that because people have said that, you know, because it didn't, maybe at that time, live up to what people thought The Exorcist was, you know. But I always thought the Part 2 and 3 got a bad rap. I never thought they were that bad of movies. And the way you're describing it kind of makes you want to go back and watch Part 3 again.
It's amazing, man. I mean, if you're a horror fan, I would say at least give it a shot. You know, that's my highest recommendation. Like I said before, I definitely sympathize towards people who do have a little bit of the ADD thing, especially with today's generation, the way they talk. You know, but I mean, I just say, hey, man, bear with it. And then once you get to those sequences, you're hooked. I mean, you are literally hooked. And yeah, I'll definitely say Part 2, skip it. I'll give you a quick backstory on these films. When I was 12 or 13, I don't even know how the subject came up, but my grandmother knew that I loved horror movies, and they were kind of the forbidden. They were the forbidden fruit in my family. I was not allowed to watch scary movies, and so my grandma, you know, of course, grandmothers spoil their grandkids.
Of course,
she gave me Exorcist 1 and 3, you know, and she had tapes of movies and stuff. And she gave me she said, you know, I don't have Part 2. I think Part 2 is crap. You know, you don't have to watch it. Just watch 1 and 3. And I'm like, all right. Eventually I did rent Part 2 out of curiosity. And I think the movie gets lost, Part 2. The way I look at it, it's where a filmmaker tries to be desperately different than the first one, which I definitely applaud. I'm like, I sympathize with that. But at the same time, it's like you also try to be too artsy-fartsy. Yeah. Don't, you know, stick to the basics, man. You know, it's a possession movie. It got popular because it was based on its possession, and they took chances. They used dialogue that was really edgy, that was pretty taboo, you know, and you really technically shouldn't go there, but you went there, right? It's like a comedian making racial or sexual jokes, you know. It's like a Seth MacFarlane type of thing. It's like, I feel bad for laughing, but shit, that was funny. You know, it's the same thing with Dave Chappelle. You know, it's the same with The Exorcist, the original. It's like they went there, and so Part 2, it's like they want to be different, but they also got lost. You know, and they didn't know where they're going. And by the end of the movie, you literally have no idea what the heck's going on. And so, yeah, I think that's why Part 2 gets such a bad rap. Part 3, I think, Part 3 is like loose change in the couch. Mm-hmm. It just got lost. You know, I think it just got lost in the shuffle. and which is sad because it's good. You know, part two is like the Batman and Robin of horror movies. You know, it's just like just not good.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that my top 10, my number 10 movie in the top 10 list here is very similar to what you were just talking about. That maybe is not for the ADD generation. It's not that old of a movie though, but it is a movie that focuses on the slow burn. And the movie I'm talking about is a 2005 Australian film called Wolf Creek. Have you ever seen Wolf Creek before, Josh?
Oh yeah.
Have you? Okay, great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I went to the theater to see that.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, Wolf Creek, man, to me this movie is what a horror movie should be, because it's so slow in the beginning. Like it does make you think, like if you're AD, like, God, man, well, this is a horror film. Let's get to it. But what it's doing is indirectly, like without you knowing it, it's making you care about these characters, these kids, because they seem so real. They come off the screen like, oh, that's like my friend. That's like, I know it's something like that, And they're not stereotypes. They're not cliches like you would see in other slasher films. They're very real. They're very And the atmosphere, the cinematography is so gritty and so raw. It's very reminiscent of, let's say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left. It has that kind of feel. But to me, what I liked about it is, they're in this remote area of Australia. Where are you gonna go? There's nowhere to go, and this whole thing is with Mick Taylor. He's the baddie in the movie. He's the bad guy, and he's helping out these stranded backpackers. Get across because their car broke down. So he's helping them. And as horror movies turn out, he's the bad guy. He's gonna try and kill him, but he's not like a slasher. He's not going to just kill you real quick and get it over with. To him, it's like a hunting game. It's like the original Hunger Games. It's a sport. It's so, oh man, I don't know. To me, it was such a good movie because I remember when I first saw it. Now, I'll be honest, I have a hard time watching movies with people with other accents. I don't know why, but the British accent, the Australian accent, I don't know. For me, I have a hard time. I do watch them. I'm not an idiot. I do watch them. But for some reason, if they don't speak our accent, whatever, it's harder for me to get into them. But like the Australian accent I can listen to pretty easily for some reason. And like Wolf Creek being an Australian movie, I almost passed up on it. I never wanted to watch it because I was like, this is an Australian movie. It wasn't made here in the States. This isn't going to be good, whatever. And I don't know, man. This is 2005. This is a long time ago, obviously. 10 years ago. I was a little younger.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, I'm gonna see it. But I did go see it. I took my fiance and we went and seen it. Dude, it was so good that we actually left the show, called my fiance's sister and her sister's husband, and made them come to the show. And then we watched it a second time right away, 2 times in a row. That's how good it was. So, and I know the thing that sucks about Wolf Creek though is it's a lot of people have never seen it. If you ask somebody if they've seen Wolf Creek, they don't know what you're talking about. Because it is an Australian movie, it's not a huge American, release over here. And so people haven't seen it. But I remember one thing that stands out to me the most is I heard that the guy who plays Mick Taylor, the bad guy in the movie, his name is John Jarratt. And I remember reading a review one time when it came out. It said, imagine seeing Mr. Rogers go on a killing spree. That's what John Jarratt, I guess in Australia, he is like their Mr. Rogers. At one point, he was like their Mr. Rogers. And then he goes and does this movie. So it's like they said, imagine seeing Mr. Rogers go on a killing spree. I was like, good God. I had no idea who he was when I saw the movie. I just thought he was a badass. I was like, this dude's cool.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take on that movie, Mr. Rogers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I went to the theater to see that. I remember me and a buddy went to the theater to see that, and I do remember the Australian accents, and the one big criticism I definitely get is, and I can definitely watch another movie. Obviously, one of my favorite dramas is Schindler's List, and obviously that movie is just filtered with accents that are not American. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I'll say about Wolf Creek was the fact that the Australian accents were awfully thick.
Yes.
And I remember they were a little thick, and I thought some of the dialogue, and you're totally right, man. It's like they made them into just your everyday, average Joe kids, but the accents were kind of thick, and the dialogue was kind of hard to follow a little bit, you know, and it was just like, you know, I think there was a scene, I don't know if they were at a hotel or they were at a park, but they were at a pool. And I know the one dude was trying to confess his love to the girl. It's like, you know, one of those cliche type of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I just had no idea what they were saying. But I got the gist of it, you know. You know, I got the gist of it. So I know, okay, you know, this dude, he's digging this girl and whatever. Okay, I got you. You know, and then they're driving to this, if I remember correctly, this deserted area, and then eventually Mr. Rogers, if you will, you know, comes along, and then, you know, chaos ensued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I remember the villain was really creepy. He was, if anything, I'm surprised. Well, I think they did spawn sequels, but I'm surprised they didn't. He didn't take off like a Freddy Krueger or you know, Jason or something like that.
I think it's because the Australian person. I really do think it's because it's Australian, so Americans can't relate to, you know, because he's like, to me, you know, Mick in this movie, I loved him. He was funny. He was like, had the one-liners, but he was still he was creepy in his own way. He was like Crocodile Dundee on crack. Like, this dude was just, he was nuts.
Right.
But I think because he wasn't what Americans are accustomed to in their slasher films, I think it's why it didn't take off. It did spawn a sequel, Wolf Creek 2. The sequel wasn't quite as good as the original, and apparently I think there's a part 3, but these are all movies that are still being made in Australia, so they may or may not, you know, make it over here to the States. But I remember watching this movie, and I think what made me like it so much is they only had $1 million budget, which, you know, is a lot of money for guys like us making movies, but to a studio, that's not really a lot.
Mm-hmm.
$1 million. So they had to really focus on the atmosphere. They had to focus on the environment and use that as a character piece in itself. And I think that's what sells this movie to me. It's like, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and this guy can kill you whenever he wants, but he's toying with you like cat and mouse. He doesn't want to. Like, and this could really happen. And I think those are the two things I should have mentioned in the beginning. These are the two things that I think about when I was making my list. One, the biggest thing was replay value. If I can replay this movie at any time or pop it in right now and watch it, that's a big thing for me. And also, because I don't get scared in these movies, I liked to think of things that could possibly really happen to me. They don't always have to, because not every movie. There are good movies that can't happen, but those are the kind of things that you have to stop and think about. I like that. But the biggest thing is replay value, and this was a fun movie that I could pop in right now and go watch. Because there's a lot of movies that are classics, and I won't say any names, so I don't want to ruin anybody's, you know, your list if you have them. But there are a lot of classics that didn't make my list because I can't watch them right now. They're good movies, they're great movies, but if they can't be, the rewatchability isn't there, then to me it's like, it's a great movie, but it's not really for me, you know?
Right.
So what would you say?
That definitely makes sense. And yeah, you're right.
What would you say is your number 9, Josh?
Number 9, so let's go over and let's bring out some Blade, man. I'm going to put number 9 with Halloween H2O.
Oh, okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the classic.
Mm-hmm.
I'll even go as far as saying I actually enjoyed the Rob Zombie edition. Not part 2 of the Rob Zombie edition, but the first one. Mm. And then, but the reason why I love H2O so much is, well, for one, I remember going to the theater. I was 16 or 17 years old in high school. I went to the theater to see it, and I was just thrilled by it, you know. And I thought it was just so cool because it was an updated edition of Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis came back to, you know, play Laurie Strode again, and it was just really good. I was just really, you know, taken back by it. The one scene I loved to death that actually gave me chills when I was sitting in the theater was the fact that after Josh Hartnett and the girl, I think LL was still alive. It's with LL, Cool J as well. They make their escape, and then Jamie Lee Curtis says she's going to go back and look for Michael, and she's got the axe in her hand. And the music's kind of slow.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and of course Josh plays the son. He's all frantic. He doesn't want to lose his mom. But she's saying, go, I'm going to go look for him. And then she goes back. She's got the axe in her hand. The camera's panned upward, you know, probably, you know, on a scraper or a skyscraper holder thing. And she's holding the axe, and she screams out, Michael! And the music kicks in double loud, man. They just pump that volume up.
I can see the scene in my head, dude.
Chills. Yeah, I just had chills when that scene kicked in, man. I was just like, fuck yeah. It was almost like a wrestling match, because it was during the era with the Attitude Era was
Mm-hmm.
on. And it was just like, man, I am fuck. And then they went at it, man. It was just like, it was Jamie Lee Curtis versus Michael Myers. And she had the axe, he had the blade, then she went for the run. She was running through the lobbies to try to hide underneath tables, and he was tossing shit around like they were fucking rag dolls. It was great, man. I had so much fun with this movie, and it had some good kill scares. There was a scene in the beginning which was kind of more of a deep scare, but it was cool, where the mom and the little girl, these are just some random characters, where they were going to go, you know, at a rest stop. The little girl had to go to the bathroom, and then Michael Myers is walking around the urinals, you know, and then eventually it's the mom, you know, so it's a false scare, but it was cool, you know, and I enjoyed it so much, you know, and it's also one of my favorite horror writers that you might be familiar with, which is Kevin Williamson. He was a big guru for a lot of these films back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's still active today, but during this time, this was his Attitude Era.
Yeah, this is his
and
heyday,
yeah,
for sure.
Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah, it was his heyday. He was part of this, Scream, a few others, and yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis brought him in to write the script. You know, he was hot at the time, and they originally wanted to bring in John Carpenter to direct. John Carpenter passed, and so they brought in Steve Miner, you know, who did 2 of the Friday the 13th sequels, and so Steve Miner was perfect for this. So yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. H2O to me is one of the best Halloween films in the franchise. I know a lot of people didn't like it because it was very heavily influenced by the Scream franchise, obviously because the writer wrote Scream. But I mean, so a lot of people, you know, didn't like it because it kind of, you know, took away from what we knew from the original Halloween 2. But I always thought, like, it's one of those things, like, you know, like I've said, I've loved the Friday the 13th franchise. I always have. But I can understand what Friday the 13th is. Halloween fans, on the flip side, most of them fail to acknowledge what Halloween is. Halloween, the first one, Halloween, you know, the second one, are great films, but they tend to forget. We also got Season of the Witch, you know, part 3. We got 4, 5, and 6, which had this, you know, supernatural cult story that was just asinine. So by the time H2O came around, like, to me, that was a welcoming. I was like, man, thank you, God. Laurie Strode is back. Got Michael Myers back to the normal Michael Myers. I mean, Josh Hartnett and I think it was Michelle Williams, right? It was a blonde chick that was in that. Like, I mean, they were kind of the pretty
I believe so.
The pretty people that were cast, you know, which was a take off of Scream. But I was kind of like, but I mean, you had Jamie Lee Curtis back, and you had Michael back to being Michael, and it was. And H2O to me, absolutely, that's one of those movies, like I said, replay value. I could pop that in right now and watch it, no problem. I thought that was really cool, and they made LL Cool J likable. So I mean, come on, that's cool, you know.
Yeah, no, they did a phenomenal job. Also, too, you know, and I don't want to sound like cliche Hollywood this and Hollywood that, but it had A-list material all over it. You know, with Jamie Lee Curtis coming back. Steve Miner directing, you know, which is he's definitely a number 2 and number 3 in the horror list, you know, with John Carpenter and Wes Craven, stuff like that, you know. So, yeah, and I mean, the only thing he was missing was Donald Pleasence, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That was the only thing that was missing, but unfortunately, I think he passed away, you know, or he just didn't do it.
He had passed before that.
So, that was the only thing that was missing, but we got a lot of Donald in the sequels.
I also love the ending too, though, man. What about that ending with Jamie Lee Curtis with the axe when she finally does get Michael and he's pinned and she's like, chops his head off, whatever. You're like, holy shit, because you watch those movies all the time and you're like, obviously the killer keeps coming back, and it's kind of like you're thinking in your head like, well, man, if you cut this fucker's head off, you can't come back from that. It's like, I thought that was really
exactly
cool.
That concluded the series in my book. Resurrection in my freaking world, dude, does not exist.
Oh god,
sucks. So it's like, that concluded the series. That was a phenomenal ending, because it's also to an ending that you take with you when you leave the theater. A movie's job, no matter what genre, a movie's job is when you leave the theater, or if you turn it off, whatever, it makes you think at least for 20 minutes. It's like, wow, what an ending! Wow, what a movie! It's like, and H2O did its job. And that ending was phenomenal when she just first reaching out for the hand for this kind of bonding kind of moment, and then bam, with the axe, and the head goes flying, and that sealed his fate. Michael was dead, and that killed Freddy's dead. Jason goes to hell, of course. It's like that's how you end a series. That's how you do it.
I agree. I think that's what stands out to me, because, like you just said, Freddy's dead. When they first killed Freddy for the very first incident, this is it for Freddy. Freddy's Dead to me was a piece of crap movie and a piece of crap ending. Like, that's how you kill Freddy. You put all these fucking dynamites in his chest and his and all that stuff, and it's just like he blows up. And I don't know. It was silly to me. Jason Goes to Hell, I can't even talk about. I'll be on this conversation for 5 hours from now still bitching about that piece of shit. That movie is a disgrace of disgraces. I hate that fucking movie. But also, so you take that piece of shit out of the equation, but you do go back to the final chapter, which is part 4. That was supposed to be the original ending to Jason Voorhees' story. And that death scene, while it was cool, Tommy Jarvis's little boy with the machete, hacking away at Jason, that imagery was really cool, but that's nothing to the pure brutality to see Jamie Lee Curtis finally flip the script on Michael, take that axe, and whoosh, and that's it. Heads will roll, motherfucker. That's over. Right. It was, that was such a great ending. And then Resurrection had to go fuck it up, but you can't take away from H2O. Absolutely.
Yeah. Resurrection, like I said, Resurrection does not exist. And you mentioned Friday the 13th, final chapter. That wasn't directed by Steve Miner, but Steve Miner did part 2 and 3.
Yes,
if I remember correctly. And I think one of those sequels, they hang Jason, which is very similar to a beheading. Part it's 3. Like they know how to make a killer look dead. It's like none of this zombie shit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you're right, because part 3 they hang Jason, and the camera just, no pun intended, but the camera hangs on him and slowly moves back, and you just see Jason's lifeless body hanging there, and and it's just, Steve Miner, man, he doesn't get a lot of the credit that he deserves, man. He was so good in a lot of these horror films that made concepts that are still used today.
Absolutely. So, he did a fantastic job.
My number 9 movie is kind of a cheat, I'll be honest. It's more of a thriller, but it does tend into the horror genre because of some supernatural elements, or you're led to believe supernatural. But there's a body count too, which makes me think it's a horror film. But my number 9 is Identity from 2003, with John Cusack, Ray Liotta, Amanda Peet.
Yeah.
The reason why I like Identity so much and why I can replay it, because I feel like every time I watch the movie again, I pick up something new that I didn't see before. For those that aren't familiar with Identity is basically about a group of strangers that are stranded at a desert hotel, I believe in Nevada, during a really nasty rainstorm. One of those strangers is Ray Liotta, who is transporting a convict who is being held for death row. The convict escapes, and people start dying, so everybody naturally thinks this guy is doing the killing, but you don't really know, because there are hints and there are things that make you believe it could be somebody else. So it's like a whodunit, which is a thriller, and that's one of my favorite one of my favorite things of horror films or thrillers, whatever, is the whodunit. I love the mystery of not knowing and trying to guess who it is. And with Identity, there, at least for me, and I could be wrong, and if someone says they got it, maybe they did, but I think they're probably lying, because this ending, and I won't spoil it, because in case no one has never seen this movie, because it wasn't extremely popular, you know. The ending of this movie, to me, was like a holy shit moment. It was so shocking. To other people, it was like a holy shit, that's garbage. This is horrible. Like, why would you end the movie this way? But I thought it was so cool, because I spent the whole movie trying to figure out who the fucking killer is, you know? And then when you find out, and then you find out the big twist, you're like, what the fuck? Like, it was mind blown. Like, I don't know, I just... So then when I watch it again, now that I know the ending, you know, I try and go back and I try and see, because a lot of directors will leave red herrings, so, or things that kind of, if you look, like The Sixth Sense, if you go back and watch The Sixth Sense, you can see there are clues that show you that Bruce Willis is dead. Spoiler. But this movie, I go back and I try to watch it, see, are there little, you know, hints and are there clues that show you what this ending is going to be. And the cast, I mean, I'm not a big fan of John Cusack. I don't hate him by any means. I'm not a huge fan, though. But to me, I think he's brilliant in this movie. I really think he plays this character to a T. I really think Ray Liotta is great in this movie. Amanda Peet is Amanda Peet, but, you know, nothing wrong with that. Did you ever watch Identity? I mean, that's not a popular movie, so.
Yeah, no, I did. Not to sideline anything, but when you said Amanda Peet, I thought of the Howard Stern rant about Amanda Peet. I don't know if you ever heard it. It's on YouTube. Just type in a Howard Stern Amanda Peet, and he just goes ape shit about her, and he doesn't like her. Anyway, but I
hold on. Before you go on that, Josh, hold on. Why does he hate Amanda Peet? I'm curious for our listeners that maybe are listening as well that don't know. Why does he hate Amanda Peet? Because I've never heard this.
Yeah, this was a couple years ago. I forget the name of the film, but she went on the David Letterman show to promote a film. Mm-hmm. And, you know, David Letterman, you know, he's being funny, but he's also asking her questions about the movie. And she, I guess, the way it came off is she just didn't have a clue about the movie. You know, where she just came in there and almost sounded like a complete bitch, you know, and she didn't know anything. There was a reference about the producer or something like that, and Howard just kind of went off. They were playing the recording. That's what usually on Howard Stern they'll record or replay recordings and stuff. And they're analyzing, you know, this on the David Letterman show, and he, you know, Howard just goes off. He said there are people out there who are starting artists. He was you know, pulling it back for us indie guys. You know, he's like, there are people out there who will give their left arm just to get a movie made, and you're just shitting all over this movie. Fuck this bitch.
Oh my god!
Wow. Yeah, it's insane. I don't know. I'm not hardcore familiar with Amanda Peet's work. I'm aware of her. You know, I'm sure she's a sweetheart and stuff like that. But it does make you almost think like not to hire her in a way. You know, and that's kind of bad because I'm a hardcore Howard fan. I will listen to Howard till the sun comes down. But yeah, like I said, just go on YouTube, just type in a Howard Stern Amanda Peet, and it's probably under Rant or, you know, one of those type of things. And yeah, it's pretty funny. It's about 5 minutes long, 5-6 minutes long on YouTube, and it's pretty funny, you know. But yeah, so definitely check it out. But yeah, the Identity, I'm definitely familiar with that. I'm a big fan of Ray Liotta. I definitely think he's one of those actors that should have been bigger.
Absolutely.
I don't know if they were, you know, I think there's some stuff. I don't know. It's a mystery that he didn't become that caliber as a Tom Cruise or a Tom Hanks or what have you, you know, because besides Goodfellas, he was really good in Turbulence, really good in Identity, as you just mentioned. There's a handful of other films that he was in. He was in Killing Me Softly with Brad Pitt this past year. He was really very good in it. So it's kind of a mystery that he hasn't really catapulted into that guy. I'm a big fan of John Cusack. I think he's a really good actor. He seems to be very open with roles. I know he's very active in Chicago, You know, he's always working. And yeah, I definitely think, you know, it's definitely a great movie, and yeah, it definitely has one of those endings, you know, where you don't see it coming. You mentioned with the Bruce Willis thing with Sixth Sense, it's like one of those kind of endings. Mm-hmm. You know, you just don't see it. You don't see this particular thing coming. There's a body count in there. It's definitely not one I would definitely think of. But yeah, because it's definitely got that body count in there. But yeah, it's definitely a cool movie.
What would you say is your number 8, Josh?
Number 8, what did I do last time? H2O. So I'm going to bounce back into the paranormal, and we're going to do Amityville Horror Part 2, The Possession. This one is, once again, kind of an oldie. This one's from the super early 80s, I think 82, if I remember correctly. This is actually the sequel to the Amityville Horror series. Of course, you know, there's the legendary house, which I think is in the Rhode Island area, where the house was supposedly possessed and stuff like that. But this is actually based on the prequel of that story, where this family gets slaughtered by their son due to voices in his head, a possession by a demon, and it's really creeping and disturbing. There's no real backstory on the demons or the ghosts themselves. You know, they're just kind of in the house, but the way they build it up, and I'm gonna throw this out there, it deals with not just with possession, but it also deals with child abuse. It deals with incest. It deals with it's very disturbing film, and this is all rattled around, number one, our behaviors, and number two, you kind of leave yourself open to, you know, a possession, you know, which is pretty much, you know, abuse and stress, crazy stuff going on, and just, it's just very crazy of a film. And then the ending, it's not really towards the ending, it's more of the complex of the story, but once the son, this is a spoiler, but I definitely recommend it. When the son finally decides he's gonna kill everybody, and he's possessed, and they make it well known. He's got the makeup on and everything. The way it's shot is so creepy. It's thundering outside. It's that old-fashioned, you know, lightning, thunder, storming, power's out, and he gets the shotgun, and he's just off in the family one by one. And for my personal take, whenever kids are involved, especially, you know, preteens that are killed in these movies, in my point of view, there's nothing more disturbing than that. And the way they shoot it, and there's no remorse, it's mind-numbing. I actually saw this movie the first time probably a year ago, if not a little longer. And they were all on Netflix, and I was just kind of, I think I watched a documentary on the Amityville Horror, and I just watched the originals, 1 through 3. 3 is crap. Not even going to mention that. But 2, I mean, it's way scarier than the first movie. And I think, in my point of view, the first movie, it's kind of like The Exorcist Part 2. It's just more, it's just scary moments in this house, but nothing really happens, in my point of view. And, you know, I know the Warren family, the haunting experts, or in the investigations, you know, a lot of people have investigated these type of things, whatever, but Part 2, because the prequel, because the slaughter actually happened. There was a shooting. The son killed his family. But it's such a mystery because everyone's got a story on it. Either it was just he was kind of schizophrenic, he was hearing voices, or there really was a demon in there that was making him doing effed up things. So yeah, that's definitely my next one, and it's just beyond disturbing. It's crazy.
See, I'll have to check that out because I'll be honest, I've never seen part 2 of that movie. I've seen the original, I've seen the remake, and I've seen the documentary that's based on the Amityville Horror House. I've never seen part 2 or part 3 of the Amityville Horror. I've always heard that they don't live up to the original film, so I never seek them out. But you definitely make a case for why I should watch it. I'll have to check that out because it sounds really interesting. It seems like I've been missing out for being a big horror fan. It seems like I missed out on a big movie there for listening to other people.
Well, like I said, I just saw it a year ago. Maybe a year and a half ago. I just saw it. And the thing is that's what's great about these movies is through various different things. Like I said, I was watching a documentary. I'm been big on documentaries for the longest time now, and it kind of makes you go back and either discover or rediscover an old movie. And like I said before, the first one is very well known. I think the sequels, just like most sequels, kind of get shoved underneath the rug a little bit, but this one, it was just so creepy. And not to throw more wrestling in here, but Chris Jericho on his podcast, he had a paranormal expert on his show like a year ago, and they brought up that movie, that exact one, the Amityville Horror Part 2, The Possession. And even Jericho said on his podcast, this movie freaked the F out of me. I was scared to death. It's like it's that good. And like before, it builds into the possession, and once the demon takes control of the boy, there's all this crap going on. That's not even like super demonic, but it's demonic. It's like evil behavior. And like I said, there's incest involved, child abuse. There's a lot of crap that goes on. And with the demonic, folklore, when that type of stuff happens, that leaves an open door for demonic possessioning or hauntings and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really interesting and it's really disturbing.
All right. Well, my number 8 movie is finally a horror film. This isn't a cheat. We're going to go to the horror. It's a remake, though, and I know people listening to the podcast are probably thinking, what the hell, Matt, a remake? But let me tell you, this is a remake to end all remakes. I know a lot of people talk about horror films and alien movies and things like that, and they have their specific movie. Alien with Ripley is really popular, but to me, the definite alien movie is the remake of the 1951 The Thing from Another World. That is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. This movie, to me, is one of when I watched this movie originally, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. This was one of the creepiest fucking movies I had ever seen. Like the thing, the shapeshifter, and the gore effects. My God, it's so disgusting at times, but I love it because that's what I like, But it's so disgusting. But this movie broke the one rule in any movie that I have. You can't. One thing you can't do in any movie is you can't kill a dog. That in my view, you can't kill a dog. You can kill women, you can kill children, kill fucking babies if you have to. I prefer you don't, but if you have to get a story point across, kill a baby, go ahead and do it. You kill a dog, you cross the line, man. You can't kill fucking dogs. This fucking movie not only kills a bunch of fucking dogs, but this movie has the dog. The dog is the thing in the beginning. The dog is this shape, and it kills the other dogs. And oh my God, did I get mad thinking of this movie? But that's what I love about it, because I think the dog, the fact that the movie would use the dog as the thing to start this whole thing, I think that was really, really good. It wasn't just some what do they call those? A hitcher type of guy that's just out there. Oh, come on in, man. It's cold out here in Antarctica. Come on in. No, it was a fucking dog. Obviously, they're gonna bring the dog into the shelter, because it's a dog. This man's best friend. But the dog is the thing, I don't know. I really think this movie, the atmosphere of this movie, it's so creepy. It's so suspenseful. But what makes this movie so good to me, as this was, I don't know if you know this, you probably do because you're a horror fan like I am, this movie was a flop. This was a disaster when this movie came out. Like, this movie was one of those films people this never be heard of again. It's gone. This movie's horrible, you know. And of course, there's no way it could compete. I believe at the time with E.T., which no competition. E.T. kills it. But I love this movie, and the biggest strong point of this movie, besides the atmosphere, which obviously you're going to have because John Carpenter directed this film, and John Carpenter is known as the master of horror for a lot of reasons. This is one of them, I would assume. But I mean, the main star, dude, Kurt Russell with the beard. This is badass Kurt Russell at his best. This dude's awesome in this movie. I really like the Kurt Russell in this film. I really like the way that he navigates through the story. I don't want to spoil a lot of these movies because I feel like a 1982 movie, a lot of young people might not have seen this film, so I'm trying to get the point across without spoiling it. I guess I'll just say that basically this is in my opinion, one of John Carpenter's best movies. It's not for people with weak stomachs. Even though it's 1982, in my opinion, these special effects still hold up. I think this is still really good. Not something that maybe if you're squeamish or if you don't like scary movies, maybe not something you should check out. Because in my opinion, I think it still holds up, and I think the atmosphere of this movie really. I mean, it's one of those films like you're in Antarctica. It's like Wolf Creek in a lot of ways, but stronger to me because you're in Antarctica. You can't even go outside and run for your life. It's fucking freezing. You're stuck. And this thing can shapeshift into anything. So it could be, you might be in a room with your buddy thinking you're hiding out from this thing, think you're going to get away, and your buddy is the fucking thing. You don't even know. It's crazy. It's I don't know. Did you ever? I'm sure you did. Did you ever watch this movie? Did you watch the thing?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah.
Did you like it as much as I did, or it sucks?
I liked it. I wasn't hardcore into it like yourself, but I did like it. I think I kind of put in the same category, and this might sound kind of bizarre, as the original Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
You know, I really enjoyed it. You know, I really enjoy those movies, but the effects, I don't know, man. I think, for me, the effects didn't really do anything for me.
Oh, really?
For this particular film. Maybe because I was kind of twisted. I don't know. But, I think the one scene I like the best in there is when Kurt Russell kind of lines everybody up to see who's infected.
Yeah.
You know, and I like that scene out of the entire movie because that left a little bit of suspense. I think when you go kind of crazy with effects, it kind of it's like when they say today everything is all CG and, you know, like the Star Wars prequels was all, you know, green screen and CG and lack of story. It's like I think sometimes that kind of overtakes a story a little bit.
That's true.
I don't think not so much with the thing, but it was just like that was my thing. My thing always with the thing. It's like, yeah, these are cool, but it's like, all right, I kind of want what else is going to happen? You know, it's like, I guess, I don't know, maybe in my mind, I'm kind of like, all right, I'm cool with that, you know, now let's something else, you know, what are they going to do? But the special effects are kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that when this comes to special effects, for me, what kept me interested, even to today's date, what keeps me interested is the mutating dog, the dog that mutates, and then the special effects that come from that, and unfortunately the other dogs, their carcasses after they're killed, you know, because like I said, man, that's the drawing line for me. You can't fuck with. I don't even like Old Yeller because of that shit, or Marley and Me. Fuck you, Marley and Me. I can't do it, man. But to watch the dogs mutating and, you know, it's in pain and all that kind of stuff, and it's just like, I don't know, man. I can't go that route. But that is for a movie to get me emotionally invested, it does take a lot. In horror films, because I know what to expect. You know, I know not to get invested in a lot of these characters because they're not going to live. This is the whole point. But it was a dog, man. Yeah, you not going to get invested in the dog. You know, I don't know. I'm a big dog person. So that to me was a big selling point. And then of course Kurt Russell. Man, I love Kurt Russell. I know he's not the big star that maybe he should have become, especially with you know, all the John Carpenter movies, you know, Snake Plissken character, and I really thought Kurt should have been a bigger star than he was, but he was a shining point in this movie as well for me. What?
Right. I was just gonna mention. See, that we were. I'm the same with dogs too. Like, I was watching the Babadook the other night, and there's a dog that gets killed in that movie. You know, quick spoiler.
I've never seen the Babadook. That's pretty good, huh?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's pretty. It starts off a little slow, but it's not bad. But I was just going to mention, I'm the same thing with kids. I get freaked out when I see a kid in jeopardy, because I think the same thing with a dog. When a dog or a kid is in trouble, they're too small to really defend themselves.
Yes.
So it's like they are beyond defenseless, and I think it was Gene Siskel, Siskel and Ebert. He used to say he hated seeing kids in trouble in horror movies because he thought it was cheap. Now, I necessarily don't think it's cheap, but it is a good way to open the door to some suspense or scares, and it just depends how you shoot it and how you execute it, and it's just like, and it strikes a nerve, so it's with you with dogs.
I will say, on one hand, because that's a big driving point for the Thing, and in other movies, I will say he is kind of right. It is kind of cheap, and the only reason why I say that is because with, let's say, a dog, you don't get character development from a dog. A dog shows up, wags its tail, looks all playful, and you fall in love. Oh, it's a dog, you fall in love. Now you hurt that dog, you motherfucker, you hurt the dog. The dog didn't have to do shit to get you invested, because it's a dog, you already are. Same with the baby. The baby does a little baby giggle, laugh thingy, whatever the hell babies do, and it's a baby, it's so cute, and then something happens to that baby, oh, you motherfucker, you hurt a baby. An adult, a kid, you have to really, make personalities and that draw people in, so it's harder to make character development out of them versus a dog and a baby. It is kind of cheap because you don't have to do a lot. Like, to me, John Wick, have you ever seen John Wick before I go spoil this movie?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, John Wick, that puppy in that movie did not have to do much to get the audience, like, when that puppy gets killed in John Wick, I jumped off my couch. I was screaming at my TV. I thought I was like, son of a bitch, man. And I'm like, so like you rooting for Keanu Reeves, John Wick, the whole movie because the puppy didn't have to, but the puppy itself, didn't have to do much to get you involved. It's the fact it was a puppy. It was a cute puppy. That's all I had to do. It had to be there. So it is kind of is kind of cheap. Right. So I get what he's saying, but at the same time, hey, if it works, why not use it? I mean, that's how you get how you get people involved. Look at Old Yeller. Old Yeller is one of those movies that will stand the time as a classic because of what had to happen at the end of that movie. And the dog didn't have a lot of character development. It's a dog. It was a playful dog. It was a mean dog. It was a dog that got put down. But it was a simple arc, but it was so strong. And obviously the boy is the main character because the emotions he has to go through, the challenges that he has to make to end this story. But the dog plays just as big a part by just being a dog,
And I think that's, it kind of goes back to what we were saying, or I was saying before about the Amityville horror with the kid. It's to keep it very simple, horror movies is all about the black and white, good versus evil, and whether you have it's kind of like with John Wick, whether it's a dog or a kid or what have you, if you do something this evil, like killing the puppy, there's consequences to it. In John Wick's case, he's coming after you.
Right.
Now you just open up Pandora's box. Now you got John Wick on your ass. It's the same thing with Amityville Horror. Even though it was possession, he was still arrested and he was put on trial. He was behind bars. There are consequences to it. So yeah, I kind of see your point. And then like when Gene Siskel says, it's a cheap, but you also forget about the consequences. If a movie's written properly and if it's written well and if it's executed very well, you'll have consequences, of someone's actions. It's just not like they're not making a smut film about a dead dog, or a dead kid. It's like, no, we're telling a story, and this is why we have to have this particular victim, and then this is the consequences. This is the catalyst of that particular sequence.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think you summed it up perfectly. I can't really add much to that because that is perfect. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, what's your number 7 movie, Josh?
So my next on the list here, I actually am going to go with another one that's probably not on a lot of people's list, is the original Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock classic. So yeah, this one is, if I remember correctly, from the 1960s, and this movie is just fascinating to me all around. I rewatched this one once again, probably about a year ago, the classic, and kick me in the balls if anyone wants to. I did watch the remake, with Vince Vaughn and Hayes. But all fairness to that remake, they did shoot it shot for shot, almost. There's a few things in there, but almost shot for shot. So it's actually almost a compliment to the original, where they didn't want to. It was just a point to cash in, to see if we can cash in the franchise, and which they pretty much did. But I'm really fascinated by how the movie was executed and how it was created. And even with the Alfred Hitchcock movie, his little biography film, it's all on how he created Psycho. And then the way the movie's done, and it has so many shift turns, so many turning points left and right. 1 minute, the woman steals the money from her employer and skips town. Next minute, we meet Norman Bates, which he looks normal as hell. And what's fascinating about this movie is they don't really follow. It's like the original slasher film. It's got a body count, not a huge body count. It's like 2 or 3 victims, but it's a body count. That's why it's on my list. And the people are normal. The people are normal. They're not, assholes, in order to be a victim for a killer. They're not sexually devious, and none of that. It's just like, oh, they're smoke some pot and have premarital sex, never gonna die. And it's a predecessor. It's before Friday the 13th. It's before Halloween, and they shoot scenes in this movie where you don't see things coming. You don't see the shower scene coming. There's no real warning to it. You don't see the cop getting it in the stairwell. These are legit good scare scenes. So just think, if a filmmaker today, don't do a Psycho remake, but if a filmmaker today shot a horror movie in a slasher sense and shot it in this type of demeanor, you actually could have a really good scary film on your hands. And it's shocking, and it's got the suspense, and it's got everything. I think, once again, for today's audiences, they may kick it to the curb because it is old. It's older, primarily black and white. If you really have to, and like before, everyone's got full-blown permission to kick me in the balls, but watch the remake if you really have to. But definitely give the original a shot. It's got everything. Like I said, it's got that original ending that other movies do today, and probably in the last maybe 10 to 20 years, which is that shocker twist that we mentioned earlier. It's that ending that you don't see coming. If you have no idea what Psycho is, you have never seen it, never heard of it, and you watch this movie, I guarantee I will put $20 on the table. You will not see that ending coming. And that's how well it was shot.
Absolutely. No, Psycho from 1960 Psycho. I'm not going to talk about the Vince Vaughn movie. You're on your own there, Josh. But the original 1960 Psycho, I'm with you. It didn't make my list, but the only reason why it didn't make my list is because of replay value. It's not a movie that I could pop in right now and watch, and watch again and again and again. But it is a brilliant masterpiece of a movie. Alfred Hitchcock, he speaks for itself. You say that name, enough said right there. But the shower scene is one of those iconic horror movie scenes of all time. And the last thing you said, the ending, which I'm not going to spoil it in case there are people out there that have not seen this movie. Don't listen to Josh. Don't watch the remake. Watch the original 1960. Yes, it's black and white, but suck it up. Not everything needs to be in color. It's 2 hours or whatever, a little shorter than 2 hours. You'll be fine. You can watch it. It's a slower movie, but if you've never seen it and you don't know what that ending is, my God, what an ending that is, dude. That is the original twist ending that just, like, blows your fucking mind. I mean, but that's Alfred Hitchcock, dude. He was so good. God, I wish he was still around, dude, making movies, you know. But, like, yeah, I 100% can understand why Psycho would be on your list, because this is the original, it's the original horror film, you know. I mean, this is the one that put everything on the map for us, and you know, a slasher film or whatever, not horror film, original slasher film. This gave way to later on Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, all those movies came from this movie, and they all picked pieces from it. So yeah, absolutely, I can understand why you put that on your list for sure.
Yeah, and it's like it's before. It's got those elements that, you know, a lot of the horror movies that we talked about today. A lot of elements that, you know, Kevin Williamson, Wes Craven, even John Carpenter definitely used, you know, just to even a little bit of Steve Miner, I'm sure. You know, it's like a lot of the horror fanatics and horror filmmakers that they made it big used, you know, from Psycho. Yes. Yeah, so that's just definitely how I want to mention. And I think, like I said before, I think it is a movie that will get kicked to the curb with today's audiences. Even when I was younger, as a teenager, you know, I would be kind of skeptical on certain black and white films, but I had a lot of respect for Psycho. Even when as a kid, it's like right there with King Kong. You know, the old 1933 black and white King Kong. You know, it's just like that. These movies need to be introduced to kids at a young age, you know, so they have a respect for the older films. Mm-hmm. And then when you get older and you really learn a structure of a film, how to write a good film, just with basic characters and basic story structure. Then you throw in the horror aspects, the kill sequences and stuff like that. You really see why this is stronger than this particular film. You know, it's like, that's why this works, and that's why that one's a complete dud, you know. So yeah, I love Psycho.
Absolutely. The number 7 movie on my list also has a really big twist ending, and that movie is obviously Saw. Saw with Danny Glover, Monica Potter, Shawnee Smith, you know, the list goes on and on. I mean, this movie, and this touches back to what I said earlier on the show. I like movies of things that could actually happen to you. Now, maybe not in this exact scenario, because I don't think that anybody in this day and age can be as thought out as Jigsaw was. Most people nowadays will just shoot you and be done with it. But, I mean, this movie takes two people, Adam and Dr. Gordon, puts them in this remote location. No explanation why they're there. No, you know, just let's play a game. And then there it starts. I mean, this movie, it doesn't have the body count, really. I mean, per se. Yes, a couple people die, but it's not even about that. This is a thinking man's horror film. I think a lot of people forget how good the original Saw was because of some of its, the subpar sequels, you know. I mean, I personally, I enjoy the sequels for what they are, but I'm also one of those people that enjoy the Friday 13 sequels for what they are, so, you know, it's not saying much. But people forget how good that original Saw movie was, how strong the character development was. When you watch that film, you didn't know. Do you root for Adam? Do you root for Dr. Gordon? Should Dr. Gordon, you know, toss that cigarette to Adam and kill him, you know? And then he gets out. And then you question yourself, what if I was in a situation? What would I do? Would I be able to do this, you know, horrible thing to somebody else and live with myself? Or, you know, there's so many things that makes you think. And I think to me, and I know Saw is a gory movie in certain things, but the ending, the twist ending with Jigsaw is one of the most brilliant endings I've ever seen, because I never in a million years thought that body laying in the middle of the whole fucking movie was the killer. Like, what the hell? But it just makes you think, and I think that's one of the things that I love about Saw, because the story is so cohesive, the characters are well drawn out, they're fleshed out, they're believable, and it's not good guy versus bad guy. It's all shades of gray. And one more quick plug to Poetic. I took a lot of liberties with Saw when I wrote Poetic, because that was something that in my brain resonates with me. You're a victim of circumstance and the shades of gray, because in real life there is no black and white. We're all shades of gray. Nobody can say for 100% that they are perfect or they are a solid good person. We've all done bad things, some more than others, some worse than others. We've all done it, and that's what I like about this movie. There was no final girl that you were just, oh, the little girl, she's a virgin, she's done everything wrong, yay, get out of there alive. No, it wasn't that. It was, well, this guy's kind of a dickhead. Well, this guy's kind of a dickhead. Well, but I kind of like them, though. I kind of like the dickhead. And then you have, like, Monica Potter, who is beautiful and sweet, and Monica Potter is such a likable person and actress that, when her scenes, it's like you're rooting for her anyways. You don't really get a lot of development from her, but you still like her character anyway, just because it's Monica Potter. At least I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased to Monica. I don't know. But I really enjoyed that movie. I know you said that you put it on your list as well, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention we get a crisscross this now, which is cool. So yeah, we'll talk about that, and I'll put something else in the mention when we get there. Okay. But no, I freaking love Saw, and not just with Saw, but it's one of my favorite directors of this generation. We talked about Spielberg and Wes Craven and James Cameron, stuff like that. Just this generation, James Wan. I mean, I love this dude. The way he shoots his films, and I know I think he's up for Aquaman, I think, right now, and I think he shot one of the Fast and the Furious films. Shit, man, if I had my way, I'd say stay away from that shit and give me another horror film. It's just he's done, and I have a James Wan film I'm going to mention on my list too, another one. But not just that, though. Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a thinking man's horror film. It keeps you guessing. I mean, it's just like, is that the killer? There's the hostage with the gunman situation. How did I get here? Not just that, but the two characters who are in that cellar when they're chained up with Jigsaw in the middle, like you mentioned. They're related to each other. It's like I was hired to follow you, and and it's like, well, you're that guy? Yeah. Oh my God. It's like the story connects. Everything folds in. And what I love about Saw so much too is the fact that when that movie came out, I was taking writing classes in downtown Milwaukee, screenwriting classes, and when I first watched this movie, I was actually dating this girl at the time, and we watched it in my apartment, and I was just so enamored by this movie, just the way it was structured and put together. It was just like, it's exactly how a movie is put together, and it's a horror movie. It's brilliant, and I was just so excited for it. But yeah, I mean, and you mentioned with the twist ending, with the body. And I'm sure a lot of our audiences, our listeners, have seen Saw, but I definitely recommend it. It's definitely up there. And like I said before, it's a brilliant director who went off to make other horror genre films that are just as good. My next one I'm gonna mention is one of his brilliant pieces of work. But yeah, it's just, and also, hey, big plug here, Danny Glover's in the movie. He plays the detective that goes head to head with these goons, and eventually the Saw and everything in there. So yeah, it's a great film all around. I definitely enjoy it.
What's your number 6 pick? You mentioned the next movie you're going to mention. What's that one?
Yeah, that is a James Wan film. Let's see, and what did I mention? I mentioned Cycle before. So next one, it is The Conjuring, which is a James Wan film. This one, this is a haunted house type of film. This movie just freaked the living crap out of me, and I think it's just executed very well. The scare sequences, everything. And yeah, this is definitely one of those horror films that still kind of holds up. Well, I mean, it's not that old. It's like 2013, I think it came out originally. But it's one of those horror films where it's not panned, where it's not laughed at, and people, you know, you watch it and you're legitimately scared. And it deals with, you know, hauntings, possession, the way the scenes are executed. And it's simple. It's a simple film. It's about a family moving into a new house, which that story has been done to death. I definitely understand that. But it is based on actual events. It's based on, you know, Lorraine Warren's, you know, paranormal investigation stuff she's done. And just the way it's shot, you know, there's the ghost behind the door, the evil witch in the tree, in the cabinet areas, and the hair pulling, the ghostly activities, and eventually it climaxes into a possession, and it becomes a possession story at the very end. And it's just the way, it's just so creepy, you know. And when they finally try to, when they're in the middle of an exorcism, and when they're finally getting the demon to reveal itself, the way it's shot, the way the sheets are over the mom's face, because she's the possessee, and the way the sheets rip open and her eyes are changing and the blood's all over her face, and then she makes the escape. She's trying to, her main agenda was trying to kill one of the kids, you know, and she goes through, I don't know if it's a crawl space or something part of the basement, and one of the Warrens, you know, screams out the witch's name or something like that, and the witch just reveals itself in this monstrous look, and it's very good film, and definitely on my list.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really good movie, and that was one of those movies. Like you mentioned that, you know, haunted house movies have been done to death, but that was a movie that sort of reignited the a dead genre or subgenre, I guess you'd say, because haunted house movies have been done to death, and really, as a rule, I think audiences are tired of them because they've become cliche, they become boring, and then The Conjuring comes out and it just flips it on its head, because it wasn't campy. It took itself very, very seriously, and a lot of that obviously is because of James Wan and his direction. But yeah, it was a movie that took itself seriously, and therefore the audience took itself seriously. So you weren't laughing at this movie, you weren't laughing at the characters, you weren't thinking of this movie as, you know, a Paranormal Activity type of movie. And, you know, this was a extremely well put together, well acted. This was a well put together movie, whether a horror or not. This was a really, really good movie, and it was also goes back to that slow burn type of film. You know, it was all building to the ending with the ghost. So yeah, I can understand why you chose that. I really enjoyed that movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, like I said before, just the way the scenes are executed. I mean, very scary, you know. And like I said before, it did its job. It's a movie that when you leave the theater, you're like, holy crap, what the hell did I just watch? I'm scared to death. Yes,
absolutely. My number 6 movie is similar in the slow build aspect, because my number 6 movie is a 1978 John Carpenter classic, Halloween, the original Halloween. The original Halloween, obviously, it helped spawn the 80s boom craze of horrors with Friday the 13th, The Nightmare on Elm Street, etc. All coming, you know, Chucky, all these things coming after the success of Halloween, which just took everybody by surprise. I mean, this movie took off. You know, people couldn't believe how successful this film had slowly built itself up. I think there's 2 things, in my opinion. I mean, obviously you could talk about how iconic Michael Myers is and things of that, you know, but there are 2 things that made this movie so good. The one thing is, with Michael Myers, is you see Michael Myers as a 6-year-old boy, and that opens the film, and he goes in the house and he kills his sister. We have no idea why. We don't know. You're not told anything. He just kills her. Then we flash forward 15 years later, and Myers escapes from the mental hospital. And he's coming home, and all he wants to do is kill Laurie Strode and whoever gets in his way. And again, we're not told really why. We don't know. Michael Myers is just evil for the sake of evil. You know, in the script, he's just called the Shape. He doesn't have a fucking name. He's just a shape. Like, he is just the definition of evil. You have Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasance, running around telling everybody who will listen that Michael is evil, needs to be stopped, and it's just all building up. And that's the second thing that makes this movie so great, in my opinion, is Halloween, in my opinion, is storytelling done right. Halloween is funny, but Halloween is like sex. Okay? It is a slow build to an exciting climax. That's what Halloween is. It is. Yeah. It is it's the definition of a slow burn, because a lot of people that have never seen the movie that would watch it today would probably think it's too slow and boring, because the death scenes are simple. They're effective, but they're simple. They're not gross out, Friday 13th splatter, anything like that. It's just Michael Myers with a butcher knife and he stabs people. But it's so effective because of the way John Carpenter shot this film. I know a lot of it had to do with the limited budget that they had, but it's still, in my opinion, this movie still holds up to today's standards, and that says a lot for a movie shot with next to nothing for a budget in 1978. I think it stands to today. If you said, Matt, you can only watch one Halloween movie out of this series, out of all the movies to choose from. Well, obviously, first I'd pick Resurrection, but besides Resurrection, I would pick... or maybe Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Maybe I'd pick that. I'd pick that one. God.
Oh God.
Yeah, I don't like either one of the Rob Zombie Halloweens. Those are both a disgrace to me. But the original Halloween, and I'm not personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Halloween series. I enjoy 1 and 2, H2O, and really, I don't know. Season of the Witch, I don't count that, but the 4 through 6, I didn't care for that whole cult storyline. So the Halloween series to me is the lesser of the franchise for me, but this one stands out because of what it is, because of the simplicity of it, and it proves that you don't have to like put it all out there to get people interested. You just have to give them a little bit and keep them interested. It's the hook, I think for me that's what makes Halloween so good. It's like when it's like a bait and hook. You give them a little bit, you hook them, and then you take them along for the ride.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think, in my opinion, with Halloween, that is a filmmaker's movie. Yes. That is a movie. This is how you make a movie with literally no money. And I think with today's technology and with so many things, at the public's disposal, like back in those days, like back in the 70s, 80s, and even a little bit of the 90s, it almost seemed like making a feature film could be almost impossible. Where today, yeah, man, you can do it. It's like you have to have enough passion, enough dedication to do it. John Carpenter definitely proved it. It's like they had like $300,000. That was the max, and I think Donald Pleasance took half of that because he was a big star at the time. So I think he took half of that money. Mm-hmm. The rest of it had to be spread out with literally everything. Not just cast and crew, but probably catering, transportation, and all that good stuff. But yeah, so I remember a lot of interviews with John Carpenter. He said the way we shot it, it's because we did have a limited budget and what we could do. So he would do like a lot of long shots. You would watch either Jamie Lee Curtis or one of the other characters, walking with the kids or whatever, and we would just do these pan long shots, and then we would cue the music. And you do these stalker scenes with Michael Myers and stuff like that. So no, I mean that's definitely a brilliant film. Definitely if you're a filmmaker, entrepreneur of some kind, definitely put Halloween on your list. Yeah, it's scary. It's definitely a scary film. That ending where Jamie Lee Curtis gets the upper hand on Michael and he's down next to the bed and she's trying to, get her second wind. She's trying to recuperate. And then Michael kind of, you almost have to think like The Undertaker got this gimmick, like he stands up just like The Undertaker or it leans up, and that still gets a response from audiences today. As a matter of fact, I believe on YouTube there are recording crowd reactions to that particular scene where people today still get freaked out when Michael Myers gets up, because that's the brilliancy of that particular scene, is the fact that you think she's safe. You know, she's like, she did it, you know? It's like, good for you, you made it. Oh shit, we were wrong. You know, here he comes. And it's like, get up and run, you know? And especially when you watch those type of movies with, you know, I'm not trying to sound sexist here, but when we watch a movie with a female, you know, they get freaked out, you know, and that's a perfect scene to take a date to.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and you mentioned the Rob Zombie stuff. You know, it's funny, when the first one first came out, I was living in California at the time when the first one came out of the Rob Zombie edition. I really enjoyed it. I think as time progressed, and I really not really perfected, but I was really working my craft as a writer and filmmaker and stuff like that. And I really got to know how filmmaking is made. It's like I realized the sins, I guess, as a filmmaker, what Rob Zombie did with that remake, you know, versus what John Carpenter did. Because I at the time, I actually was more in favor of the Rob Zombie one. I'm like, oh, hey, cool, we have a backstory, we have reasons, and I was young, I was younger, you know, and I was drinking with the boys at the time, and so my brain cells were a little bit off the wall, right? But I learned, you know, and I learned it was just like, no, this is, you know what? It's like, even though John Carpenter literally had less money, the Rob Zombie one's more cheap. Because it's like, he threw, and it's not even scary. It's like, you can't have a little boy cut up, you know, a boyfriend, and then cut up a stepdad or a dad, whatever he was. You have to build it. You have to create some kind of suspense, you know, and the profanity and the language, you know, and it was like, that was actually almost beyond cliche of a horror film. Like, the assholes always get killed. Right. The ones that have sex always die. And it was just like, when I really think about it now, that opening sequence is literally the cliche of a horror film, you know? And it's like, it's literally right there. It's like, wow. Yeah. You know, it's like, okay, I can see why people were shitting on that.
I agree. I think Rob Zombie, you know, I don't know. I like his music. I like the Devil's Reject movie that he made. But when it came to Halloween, I think he was probably one of the worst people that could have done a film, because his concept, he didn't understand what made Halloween Halloween. Michael Myers was not a Freddy Krueger. He didn't need his huge backstory and personality. He was not a Jason Voorhees who had a backstory but really no personality to speak of. Michael was just evil. We didn't know anything about him. We knew he killed his sister and went to a mental institution, and that was it. We didn't know shit else, and that's what made him scary. His mask, you know, just plain white. There was in a blue jumpsuit. There was nothing flashy about Michael Myers. He wasn't, you know, making wisecracks like Freddy. He wasn't this dominant, you know, giant force of Jason. He was just a taller, you know, guy in a jumpsuit with a white mask that, you know, killed his sister when he was a kid for some goddamn reason, and now he wants to kill his other apparent sister, you know, but like, you know, that's all you know. That's it. You had to fill in the gaps, and it's that old saying what people say, the fear of the unknown is the scariest thing, because you don't know. And that's what made Michael cool. So when you make Michael this little bratty ass boy who's, you know, looks like he needs a fucking haircut and he's this little dickhead, like, that's not scary. That just made me want to piss me off. Like, I was like, fuck this little boy. Like, fuck are you, man? Like, you know, like, oh, your stepdad was mean to you. Boo hoo hoo. Get over it, motherfucker. Like, that happens to tons of people. Like, now you go kill everybody. Like, it was just, and then you had, you know, homeless man Michael Myers and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, where he fucking looks like, you know, Bruiser Brody walking around and shit. It's like, ah, oh, dude, I don't know. I'll be a tyrant.
No, I totally get it. Honestly, for the original film, when you mentioned the mental institution, that's pretty much all you need. You don't need any more backstory than that. Right. I mean, just think of it this way. Imagine, because you work in a mental facility, like you said, it's like, imagine if you walked into work and you had a brand new coworker, or, you know, I worked in work and you had you know, someone that came into work, or they're brand new, And then you find out later on, yeah, he was in a mental ward for like 10 years. What? What? Are you kidding me? That alone would create a shocker. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a really quick backstory. Obviously, people don't have to know my day job's company name, but there was actually a story. This was before I started working there. This was maybe at least a couple of years ago. They had a worker that worked in the warehouse, and nobody knew much about him. He was real quiet. Then later on, you found out that he actually was in a psych ward, and then he was living in one of those boarding homes here in Milwaukee. And so he had some issues going on. And then one day he came in. He says, "I think I'm going to kill everybody." And he literally said that to a couple of people in the office. And so, which astonished me, is like police were never called, but they did escort him out. But it just think of that if that happened, you know, with your household or your workplace or whatever. If that were to happen, right? Mm-hmm. You know, just think like that would freak the fucking shit out of me. You know, right. I'd be like, okay, one of two things can happen. We're going to call the police, or I'm going to bash your head in, dude, because you ain't going to hurt anybody on my account. You know, it's like, okay. So that you know, so going back to Halloween, it's like, you know, if you're coming from a psych ward and there's a doctor out there saying he's got, you know, dark eyes, he's completely emotionless. I mean, it even goes back to the H2O. You have Donald Pleasant's voiceover over the credits, and he says, you know, there is no emotion. It's, you know, the devil. It's the darkest eyes. It's the devil's eyes. You know, it's like that's all you need. You don't need anything else. You know, he's emotionless, and there are people out there who literally have no emotion. They have no concept of right and wrong. You know, and it's almost like being paralyzed. You know, where you can't feel your body. These people cannot feel their emotions. So they can literally buy you flowers, or they could stab you, and they wouldn't know the difference. You know, and so, yeah, that's definitely a great movie.
Absolutely. What's your number 5?
So what was my last one that I did? It's Conjuring. So let's bring out some blades. So I'm going to make this really interesting. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven. Obviously, you know, Freddy Krueger is definitely got to be a given with these type of lists, but let's face it, man. Wes Craven was one of the kings of horror, and it's a great. I mean, not only is it scary, but it's just a great film altogether. It's got all the elements in there. Once again, it kind of goes back into the same thing I said about Psycho. You know, it didn't have those crazy cliches of assholes. I mean, you had kind of like the bully boyfriend a little bit, but he wasn't like a bully. He was just kind of a tough guy. But also, it's really fascinating how Wes Craven tried to get this movie made. It took him literally, I think, 3 years. It's one of my inspiration stories when I pursued this showbiz thing. It's the fact that it took Wes Craven 3 freaking years with Bob Shea to get this movie made, and nobody believed in it. Sean Cunningham, you know, who was behind Friday the 13th, just didn't see it. He didn't see the scare factor with Dreams. And eventually they got it made, and it became this juggernaut with sequel after sequel, spin-offs, TV shows, merchandise, all that, you know, stuff. And I remember at one point, because I moved into a new place, and I bought the box set DVDs for Nightmare on Elm Street. And I had the original before, and I gave it to my buddy. You know, it's like, hey, bro, I bought the box set. Do you want this Nightmare? And he's like, yeah, I'll take it. You know, and I remember a couple days later, you know, he called me, and he had a girl come over, and you know, they watched Nightmare on Elm Street. And he goes, bro, we had the lights off, and it was just real chill. We were watching this movie, dude. It freaked the shit out of us. It was literally actually is scary. You know, like, yeah, you know, if you take out all the humor, all the comedy, all the bullshit that Freddy Krueger had to go through, Freddy is still scary. You know, he can be scary. You have to give him the right thing. You know, you have him the right writer, the right director, which is, of course, Wes Craven. Part 3 is not bad, you know, because I think Wes was part of that, and I think Chuck Russell was the director of that one as well. So they had some pretty good material to work with. But other than that, yeah, I mean, you have to give Freddy his due and give him really good people behind him, and he can be freaking frightening. And it's kind of like what I said about The Conjuring. It's just the way it's shot and the way it's done. But yeah, Nightmare was definitely my number 5.
Well, that's funny that you say that, because my number 5 is not the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but one you touched briefly on. My number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors, also by Chuck Russell, like you mentioned, from 1987. I'm not going to say a lot about this because you kind of touched upon everything that made A Nightmare on Elm Street such a good film, and the Freddy Krueger character, and we're running a little short on time. But what I do want to say about Part 3 is what made Part 3 so much better to me than the original film is you still have Nancy from the first film, but now Nancy is grown up and she's a psychiatrist, so she's become more of her own, and now she's living with that past of what Freddy has done to her. But she wants to help these group of kids that are in this local hospital, and they're obviously, they've encountered Freddy in their dreams and they've survived. And but the thing I like about this movie is they take those Nancy and those kids and they want to fight back. It's no longer being just reactive. They're not just reacting to Freddy attacking them and now we have to fight back for our lives, blah, blah, blah. These kids, and Nancy, especially Nancy, they want to fight back. Like, I've had, you know what, Freddy, fuck this, enough. We're taking the fight to you. We want to figure out what we can do. And obviously, you can't talk about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 without the death scenes. Some of the most creative death scenes in all of horror films, with that kid walking down the hall and he's sleepwalking and his, with his veins and shit are ripped out of his arms, and obviously he came out in the Welcome to Primetime, bitch, where he slams that chick's head in the TV.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, there's so much stuff about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 that I really like. I love part 1 and 2 as well, 4 and 5, and we're not talking about Freddy's Dead, but 3 to me was just like it's like WrestleMania 3. 3 is like, it took what was great in Part 1, great in Part 2, put it all together to make this big spectacle of Part 3. Like WrestleMania 3 was a big spectacle, Hogan and Andre. Part 3 was a spectacle of Nancy and Freddy, and then Nancy has the backup, this time Kristen, who has the power to draw people into her dreams, so they're teaming up, and just so many good things went in that film. It was such a unique story at that point, because this is 87, so this is about the time where horrors kind of get into those campy sequels. Friday the 13th is kind of getting into those campy sequels at this point. Halloween, the campier sequels, things like that are getting to that point at this stage. But A Nightmare on Elm Street, only being his third one in the series, because it got a little later start than the other films, still kept it very, very grounded in its material. Obviously, somebody killing you in your dreams isn't realistic, but, well, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say that if I die in my dreams tonight, I don't know. But no, I mean, for all the same reasons that you mentioned, though.
What I was going to mention, too, is I think there's 2 different scripts of Nightmare 3, too. I think because originally they really wanted Wes Craven to come in and direct Part 3, because Part 2 just didn't live up to Part 1. And, of course, sequels, they have their struggle. But I think Part 3, they really wanted Wes to do it. And I know at that time, or in the late 80s, Wes Craven and Bob Shaye were at odds with each other, where, Wes Craven, I think he felt a little ripped off, with some of the money that they were dealing with Nightmare, because that was his creation. And Bob Shaye, he, no pun intended, but he did horror it out to Hollywood, with New Line Cinema, and they just did sequel after sequel. And, but Wes did come back. He did write a draft for it, and he contemplated on directing it, but it just never happened for whatever reason. So, and then eventually they did a rewrite, I think, when Chuck Russell came in to direct the movie. And with the, there's 2 different scripts, I think, out there. And I guess with Wes Craven, it's really dark and menacing and just disgusting, I guess. And of course, with Bob Shea and Chuck Russell coming in for part 3, I think they lighten it up just a bit. So I don't think I've ever read the original script by Wes Craven, but I can only imagine what he probably would have did. Just based on what he did with the original Nightmare, what he did with Hills Have Eyes and stuff like that, those time frames of his movies. And then later on, he came with People on the Stairs, which is freaking disturbing.
Oh, it's a great movie.
So yeah, it's definitely and it's a very underrated movie too. I think it's just because it is really disturbing in some scenes, but I think part 3 is definitely up there. I would definitely say, obviously, part 1, 3, and then New Nightmare.
Oh, New Nightmare is great too, man. I really wanted to put New Nightmare on my list today. I really wanted to put New Nightmare on there. I just couldn't think of what to take away to put it on there because New Nightmare is such a great movie in my opinion. But there's so many...
I think...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think for you, like the way I just did number 1 and you did number 3, I think it actually works out because I think if you were to lay out the best Nightmare movies, it's got to be... It's almost uncanny the way it's laid out. Part 1, Part 3, and then New Nightmare. It's like New Nightmare would be like number 3 in my list at least.
No, and I agree with you. It's a great concept of how it, because it's basically the story of Nancy. It's Nancy's story, and that's what makes it so. You see her from beginning to end, basically, in that concept. But there's so many things, like you mentioned the other script that's out there for Nightmare on Elm Street. There's so many things that went on behind the scenes that also make this Freddy, story so great. So if you've never checked it out, or anybody listening never checked it out, check out Never Sleep Again: The Elm Street Legacy. It's a 4-hour documentary. And I know you're a big documentary fan.
It's on Netflix too.
Oh, it's on Netflix? I wasn't even aware of that. I bought it on Blu-ray when it came out. Such a good documentary. So that's definitely something. If someone listened to this and they never checked that out, it's 4 hours long, so it is kind of long. But I'm telling you, man, it's so worth it though. It's so good. But hey, well, speaking of 4, the number 4, what is your number 4 movie?
All right, so I think I fleshed out most of my paranormal. So I'm going to do one more paranormal here, and then I'm going to do my rest will be Blades. So this initially would be technically my number 1 scare factor movie, and I did mention one of its predecessors, but this would be The Exorcist. Definitely, I would say it's like beyond scary of a movie, especially just the way it's executed and just the stuff they did in there was just incredible. I mean, I remember when I first saw The Exorcist, I could not sleep that entire night. As I mentioned earlier in this podcast, my grandmother gave me tapes to watch of Exorcist 1 and 3, and yeah, I literally couldn't sleep the entire night. I was like 12 or 13. I literally thought I was going to get possessed. I think I probably did a little prayer that night, and then I remember I would wake up in the middle of the night, or I'd be tossing and turning, and I would see that statue. If you remember that demon statue in the movie,
yep,
I would see that in my room, and I mean, my mind was fucking with me. I was like, that's how powerful that movie is. And I watch on YouTube crowd reactions. I watch those a lot sometimes. It's just how crowds react to a movie, and I've seen how The Exorcist were. Yeah, it not only that it did well at the time, but it was very controversial. I mean, people were leaving the theater. They were puking. Fainting. They were freaked out. I mean, this movie definitely did its job. And yeah, I mean, it's just. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are definitely aware of this movie, so they're definitely familiar. But yeah, it's definitely one that will freak the heck out of you.
Yeah, I always feel bad when I hear The Exorcist because I didn't get a chance to see The Exorcist when I was younger. I saw it when I was much, much older. I never wanted to see it. because I was raised, I was baptized Roman Catholic and all that. So like, the Exorcist was something I was kind of like, well, I don't know if I don't watch this shit, because when you're Catholic and you're going to church and people tell you all this good stuff at the time, and they're like, well, if you watch horror films, like those kind of movies, that's opening you up to the devil and all. So I'm like, I'm not watching that shit. Fuck you, man. I ain't watching. I ain't letting no fucking thing in my life. But as I got older and I kind of swayed away from Catholic and all that, I was like, I'm gonna watch this movie. And then I feel like I watched it and I built it up so much in my head, not wanting to watch it, and for a lot of reasons and things I've heard about it, when I watched it, it didn't live it up to what my expectations were. So for me, The Exorcist has never been anything special, and I always am mad about that, because every single person you talk to talks about how amazing this movie is, and the trauma and the fright that they got from watching this movie, and I'm like, man, I didn't get any of that shit. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I waited too long to watch it, but everybody talks about how great it is, though. So I could definitely understand why it'd be so high on the list, and especially like you said, the reaction that you got from it, not being able to sleep. That's the reaction that I wanted. I wanted that, because like I don't get that from movies really, very often. So like that's. But I think I think I was like 22 when I watched The Exorcist for the first time. So like I was older, and movies had changed so much, and we've seen so much since that movie came out, that by the time I saw it, I was just like, oh, all right, well, that was power of Christ compels you. Move along. It wasn't anything. It wasn't anything for me, but. My dad, if you ask my dad, he'll tell you The Exorcist is the scariest horror movie he ever made. Like, to this day, he'll tell you that. But he's a devout Catholic, so to him, that is like the end-all, be-all of horror films. So I think I just, unfortunately, I waited too long to see it. But I think that it's good. Everybody else, though, I'm just the only one, I think.
No, I mean, you're definitely not alone there. I mean, and I think there's a thing with tolerance, like you probably just had a big tolerance of things. I don't know. It's like when you're talking, I was trying to think back. Why did it freak me out so much? Was it a faith thing? Because I wasn't raised in a Catholic setting. My mom was brought up Catholic, and but my parents didn't really put a lot of religion in my household, or in my life, and especially when they got divorced. So, it was I had a very basic childhood, but I was brought up, to believe in God and stuff like that. But I really don't think that was the big reason why it freaked me out so much. I think it was just like, I don't know, man. It was just one of those things that got me. Because, like, that time, I mean, I could watch any other horror movie, Chucky, Freddy, Jason, anything, and I'm cool. That was the only movie, and that really freaked me out.
There are movies like that, man.
Left something.
There are movies like that, and there's one that I'm on my list. We'll talk about later. That to most people is kind of, I don't know, but like to me, that's the only movie it's ever gotten me. So there are movies, so it makes sense that something about The Exorcist just got you. You can't explain it. It's just something that got you.
Yeah,
and that happens. And
totally, yeah, I can explain it.
I'll tell you that my number 4 movie is not scary in the slightest bit. It's fun. It's basically my number 4 is Scream, the 1996 movie Wes Craven. Scream, the horror genre was dead in the water in 1996. There was nothing. Scream comes out. And most people think this movie is dead in arrival. The box office, the opening box office for Scream, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember it was bad. Like, this movie was dead because nobody wanted to see horror movies. But the few people that went and seen it, myself included, opening weekend, word of mouth got out there, and then the next weekend is better, and the next weekend is better, and it just slowly word got out there like, hey guys, there's a horror film out there that's actually fucking good again, and I think that really, and let's be honest, the opening scene is what does it. That gets people talking. You do not hire in 1996 Drew Barrymore and gut her in the fucking opening minutes of your movie, that was like, oh my god, you just killed America's sweetheart. You can't do that. You know, you can't kill Drew Barrymore. But Scream was so good because all the characters were likable. I really, you had someone that you could all relate to. A lot of women could relate to Sidney Prescott. A lot of guys could relate to, Jamie Campbell's Randy, the horror geek. To me, Randy was the coolest guy in the 90s. I was like, oh man, that's my dude right there, because that's how I am. I'm a fucking geek when it comes to horror films too, so I can relate to him. And then we all know that, Billy Loomis kind of jerk fucking, we all know that kind of guy. And because of Scream, you also got Halloween H2O, you mentioned earlier. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend. All these films were sparked in the revival of horror films because of Scream. And a lot of them wanted to do that whodunit. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend. They tried to follow that because Scream was a movie much like blanking the identity I mentioned earlier, that took the whodunit formula, but perfected it. In my opinion, I didn't know who the killers were. I didn't know there were fucking two killers. I didn't know who it was. I had my guesses, but when I watched that movie, I was like, man, that was really good. And you liked all the characters. I remember being really mad when Rose McGowan's Tatum, when she got killed in the garage door. I remember being really mad when she got killed, probably because she was hot, but I mean, I liked her. I thought, oh man, you killed Tatum, you son of a bitches. And then they revealed who the killers were, and I was so blown that stupid goofy ass Stu was one of the killers. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that is so awesome though, and so that, because I would have never thought that. Like, no way. So to me, yeah, I mean, it's one of the greatest horror films I've ever seen. And nowadays, people think it's a joke. No one takes it seriously anymore because of pop culture has changed. But that happens with, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. It happens. But at that time in 1996, that movie blew me away.
No, that's actually on my list too. That's actually one of my better movies too, because Scream is a huge, once again, Wes Craven. But that's a huge influence, and it's just like Scream created a new trend of horror films. Like you mentioned, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, even Halloween H2O, we talked about it earlier, where it's like Halloween H2O followed that Scream format in a way. Even though we knew who the killer was, but the way it was shot, the way it was written, it was very familiar. And yeah, I mean, I freaking love Scream, and I love the way, it kept you guessing. And I remember, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I watched it with a couple of buddies, and we were doing that. We were like, who's the killer? It was like, my thing was, this is how crazy it was. Is like, I kept saying it's Dewey, Deputy Dewey.
Oh yes, yep, I did too.
He's slow, because he's slow. He's like the one that you just would not suspect. He's a little off. He means well, but he's like, he can't be he's got to be the killer. What was remarkable in Scary Movie, which is to spoof, the Dewey character was the killer, kinda. He takes the disguise off and all that stuff, and it goes in the woman's car. But I mean, it kept us guessing. We kept saying, it's Gale Weathers, it's Dewey, it's this person, that person, that's the killer. And then eventually, you find out that Stu and I think his name is Randy, the other killer. It's like,
Billy.
Yeah, they were Billy. They were the killers. And what I really loved about Scream 2 was the motive, that they actually had a legit motive. Kind of like you mentioned with Wolf Creek and another one, is like, this is something that could actually happen. These aren't zombies. These aren't, paranormal or supernatural type characters. These are real kids, suburbia kids. And this is stuff, and especially when you hear about these high school shootings and these things that were going on, because Columbine wasn't too far off. Columbine was just a couple years later. These are things that do actually happen, and you do have these kids that just go freaking, nuts over something that could probably be fixed, and it's just like they go off the deep end for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I definitely love Scream. I just think it's well written. The characters are definitely relatable. Everything was great on it. Yeah, and I'm glad it spawned sequels. I'm glad people caught on with it. Because I remember that in documentaries that it was struggling, but the fans finally they grabbed to it.
So you mentioned Scream was on your list. How many more movies on your list do you have left to discuss?
I've got, to be honest, because you mentioned Saw, and what was the other one you mentioned? And Scream just now. So Scream, to be honest, Scream was my number one.
Oh wow!
And then Saw was my number two. Yeah, I got some runner-ups I can definitely throw in there if need be. But the next one that I was going to mention would be Jaws. And I know we talked about Jaws on Facebook IM. Jaws is definitely, and I remember I don't know if you've ever seen the horror movie countdown on Bravo that was a couple years ago. Jaws was their number one. And just to the fact that it's kind of the same element of what I just talked about with Scream, and you mentioned once again with Wolf Creek, this is something that actually happens. There are shark attacks out there. And I know people kind of say, like, well, shark attacks are kind of small. We actually know more. Sharks don't like the taste of people. Don't give me that, man. People every year are still attacked by sharks. And, you may escape, and which, I'm not saying people need to die from a shark attack, but, these things do happen, and they're very common. And a buddy of mine on Facebook, there was a shark attack report. I think it was at surfing contest a couple months ago, where a surfer, he was in the middle of a competition, and he got attacked by a shark.
I seen that.
The whole thing was caught on video, and and someone left a comment on Facebook and says, "Hey man, that's your own fault. You go in their house and you're in their domain." Like, I get it. I definitely would applaud for anyone's sport. Like you and I, we talk about wrestling a lot, right? But if you're a football player or you're a surfer going in the water, you are in his domain. So he's getting you, and that's the thing with Jaws, is the fact that is a realistic thing. And once again, very well written, very interesting in how the movie got made and how the book got optioned to be made into a film. How they actually, like Spielberg, I don't think he was the first director to jump on. I think they were looking at other people. And Spielberg actually, he threw his name in the hat. He's like, I want to do this. I think Spielberg wrote his own draft of the story, the script, and then they eventually tweaked it with another writer. And then, the characters are so interesting. The book, remarkably, is very different than the movie, though, too. It's almost like apples and oranges from the movie. I mean, I know books are definitely different from most films, but this was, like, beyond different. Like, I think Hooper and Brody's wife have an affair in the book. And I didn't read the whole book, for Jaws, but I saw, like, transcripts and stuff on YouTube about it. So it's really different. And the one thing I love about it, and you mentioned this with The Thing about being in the middle of the Arctic, Spielberg said when he shot Jaws, he wanted them to be stranded in the middle of the sea. He didn't want like the audience to say, well, hey, you guys are, kind of in the middle of hell. Why don't you go back to that land? And Spielberg said, I wanted you guys to be deserted. I wanted you to be out there in the middle of nowhere. So you can't go back. So when that shark attacks, you're stuck. You either got to fight or hope he quits. So yeah, Jaws is definitely one of my top ones.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna just jump ahead and tell you right now, Jaws is my number one pick. Jaws, the 1997 fire movie, man. That I saw it when I was very young. I saw Jaws. I don't know. I had to be 5, 6 years old. I was really young. And I've never been one that likes water. With my family, water it doesn't go well. My dad can't swim because he hates the water. My nephew, well, first, actually, my brother, when he was 4, I wasn't born yet, I was born a year later. When my brother was 4, he drowned and he died. Years later, my nephew drowned and he died. So my family stays out of the water. we don't mix well with water too much. So, but I've never liked the water. When I was younger, my parents wanted to teach me how to swim because they figured if you ever got in the water, because my brother drowned, if you ever got in the water, they wanted me to know how to swim. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't learn how to. I still to this day do not know how to swim. I didn't want to go in the water, and a big reason for that is Jaws. I had this thing when I told you earlier, movies don't. Some movies just get you, and I don't know why. I don't know why, because I'm never gonna be in the middle of a fucking ocean with a shark, but for some reason, a shark, that movie is the only thing that scares me. Not the movie itself, but the fact of a shark attack. Like, I'm never going to go on a cruise ship. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go on a cruise ship because that motherfucker might sink like the Titanic, and I ain't drowning because I can't swim, but probably going to get eaten by a shark. You know what I'm saying? That's just not happening to me. I remember being a kid after watching Jaws when I was, like I said, I was 5 or 6, and I was out in the backyard, and we had a swimming pool, and it was dark. And do you remember those blow-up things like the killer whale, like Shamu and all that kind of shit,
Oh, yeah.
Well, I remember being in the backyard, and I was out there swimming with my sister, and my parents went inside, and it's just a really small, shallow pool, so I wasn't going to drown or anything. My sister goes inside for a minute. She'll be right back. Okay, cool. She goes inside. So I'm sitting in my swimming pool, and I'm sitting in this killer whale thing, this inflatable killer whale, whatever, and I'm in the swimming pool, and it's a small, just a above-ground pool. But my imagination as a 6-year-old boy, I'm suddenly in the middle of the fucking ocean, and I swear to God, I'm floating on this thing, and if I fall off this killer whale, Jaws is going to eat me. Like, that is legit on my brain. I am terrified that if I fall off this thing, I'm dead. This shark is going to eat me in my swimming pool in the backyard. But that's how, like, for some reason, this movie got in my psyche, and I have always been afraid of sharks. I love sharks. I think they're my most fascinating animal, besides dogs. I love dogs more than anything, but I love sharks, but I love them because they terrify people, and you don't really know why, because if you don't go in the water, they can't get you. They can't come on land and get you. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, they are terrifying beasts to me, and that movie sums it up because these 3 guys are on this boat in the middle of nowhere, and this fucking shark, for whatever reason, has got it out for them, and it's like, what can you do? You can't go back to land. You can't really fight a shark. You're on this little teeny boat, where that epic line comes from. You're going to need a bigger boat. It says it in the opening of this movie. Right. The opening of this podcast. We always say, I have that quote, and because this movie is like not only is it my number 1 favorite horror movie, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. This movie, and it's like I said earlier about less is more. Because the shark didn't work when they were making this movie, that made this movie so much better because less is more. That score, all you hear is that music. You don't even see the shark, but by hearing that music, that shark is coming. And man, dude, this movie is so good to me. It's so good. I love this movie so much.
No, I'm definitely right there with you. I think with the emotion, and I'm sorry to hear about what happened with your family.
Thank you.
But
a long time
I
ago.
think it's the same aspect with it's the same aspect with me and my thing with The Exorcist. It's just like there's this thing about this movie that just freaks you out. But I was going to mention that when you were mentioning like how you were always afraid the shark was going to attack you, I was a total opposite. Every time I went in the water. And this is more for like Jaws to Revenge because they did the really shitty shark point of view shots. And when I was a kid, I would play as Jaws, and I would grab like my friends and my cousin's legs and stuff like that, and then I would pretend my eyesight was the camera, the point of view of the shark.
That's awesome.
And I just want to mention that because I was a total opposite of when you would freak out.
But that's so cool though that you would do that because that's.
Yeah.
That's kind of how these things work, though. So it's yeah, I don't know. I think that's really cool. What's the next movie on your list?
That was actually my top of my list right there. So I'm gonna do some runner-ups. Yeah, we talked about Saw and Scream. That was my number 2 and 1. So I'm gonna toss some other ones that were in the higher up of the list. So the next one I'm definitely gonna mention then would be is Friday the 13th, which I know is definitely one you love. You definitely love Jason, and it's once again it's that thing where it's like that same similar ending as Scream, that twist ending where you literally don't know who the killer is. And even to this day, it's kind of funny that Scream mentions it, though, but it's just the fact that people mention, like when you ask, like, who's the killer in Friday the 13th, everyone across the board says Jason. And it's like, well, the first movie, Jason. No, it was Jason's mom. And, no one ever guesses, that it was Jason's mom in that original movie.
Right.
Practical effects. And, really good, practical effects that they use, for the body count. They Kevin Bacon breakthrough film, for him. And the one thing I love about once again, a lot of the films that I mentioned are films that had influence on me as a filmmaker, is the fact that I love the story and how Sean Cunningham, there's a documentary called Going to Pieces, the history of slasher films. And Sean Cunningham talks about how he got Friday the 13th made. And what they did is they put a real simple ad on Variety at the time. And they put an ad out, and they didn't even have a script made yet. They just put this ad out seeing if anyone would sue them for the rights of Friday the 13th using the name. And they ended up getting calls from investors. They said, what is this movie? What's this movie about? And they were getting hits. This was, of course, way before the internet, way before social media. So people were calling them, asking them about this film. And so they had, I think it was a similar thing as Halloween. They had about $300,000 to make the first movie, and frightening, scary. And then they kind of give you that little teaser at the end where Jason comes out of the water. But I think at the time there was no telling if there was going to be a sequel, but and they spawned off countless sequels. We mentioned Steve Miner for Part 2, Part 3, a few others, like Jason 10, Jason.
Oh God, let's not go there again. Come on now. You bring up Freddy vs. Jason, I'm ending this podcast.
But I think the one lost cause is we talked about this in another conversation. It's like the fact that they never brought back Tommy Jarvis. You could have done your own H2O with Friday the 13th. You could have done something. Corey Feldman, bring him back, and I think it'd be great. If you bring in, Tommy Jarvis back for at least one more run against Jason.
That is actually really funny that you mentioned that, because that's the last movie on my list is actually Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. It was my number 2 on my list because Jaws was obviously number 1, which is Tommy Jarvis. That's the end of the trilogy. Tommy Jarvis appears in Part 4, the final chapter. He's in part 5, The New Blood, which doesn't have Jason in it, but it has that Roy pretending to be Jason. So Part 6, which is basically the end of the trilogy for Tommy Jarvis and Jason Voorhees' story. I would have loved if someday Tommy Jarvis returns in Friday the 13th and actually, gets a real ending, because I wanted Tommy to die. I've always been, for some reason, the guy who I never liked Tommy Jarvis. I don't know why. He's the Laurie Strode of the Friday the 13th movies. He's the Nancy of the Friday the 13th movies. But I never was a fan of him. I like Corey Feldman, so I liked him in Part 4. Part 5, I never liked him, but I hate that movie in general anyways, because it's it's not even Jason that they make you believe it is. But Part 6, the thing about Part 6 that I personally love so much, why this is obviously all my horror films, this is my number 2, but it's also meaning, of course, it's my favorite Friday the 13th film. and we know I'm a huge Friday the 13th fan. But the reason why I like Part 6 is Part 6 knows exactly what it is. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It takes itself serious enough. It does not make a mockery of what the film is, but there are a lot of tongue-in-cheek moments that that I think helps the movie. It's funny, you know. The one of the paintball enthusiasts gets thrown against the tree face first. He smacks into the tree. He falls down, and there's this bloody smiley face in the tree. It's campy, it's silly, you know, but you also have Jason, and Jason is never a brunt of the jokes. There's jokes around him, but Jason, this is the first time that we meet zombie Jason, because at the beginning of the movie, Tommy Jarvis and a buddy go out to the grave site because Tommy needs to make sure that Jason is dead. He needs to make sure that, you know, that we know that Jason wasn't in that last movie, Part 5, but he's like, I know I killed Jason, you know, in Part 4 or whatever, so like I need to make sure he's dead. He opens it up and his body's there, he's dead or whatever. You know, one thing goes wrong, blah blah blah, lightning strikes and Jason is now back and he kills Tommy's friend. Tommy runs off, but now we have zombie Jason. This is the Jason that now pop culture knows as Jason. You don't think of Jason with a bag over his head in Part 2. You don't think of Jason from Part 3 and 4 who's just a stronger, you know, but real guy. You think of zombie Jason, and that's what we have now. And this movie with zombie Jason is basically, it captures, in my opinion, this is simply my opinion, it captures everything that you want in a horror film. The story is fun. There's, you know, a lot of gore. The acting isn't atrocious. It's decent. You know, the script is decent, and that's what you want. You can't expect Citizen Kane here, but you don't want bullshit. There's a lot of, you know, sex appeal. You know, there's some comedy elements. The soundtrack is really good in this movie, from the actual real songs to the actual musical score, and of course, Jason. That's what you want. You want Jason, and I think that this is a fitting conclusion to the Tommy Jarvis story. But I also think that as a horror film, this is a movie that I could pop in, you know, on Roku or Blu-ray. I have them both. You know, I have the whole thing on the whole box set on Blu-ray and DVD. They get me every time they release this shit out, a new version, and I go buy it. I think I got like 8 different versions of all these fucking Friday the 13th movies. Like, oh, but this one's got better special features. Oh, I gotta buy that fucker now. You know, they get me. I don't know, but this movie is so good. What's funny about this movie, though, is the guy who wrote it and directed it, Tom, what the hell's his name? Tom McLaughlin, I think, or something like McLaughlin. I don't know the fuck. Can't pronounce the guy's last name. The guy's an asshole. But he's in one of the documentaries that I watched, the Crystal Lake Memories documentary. And he's not even a fucking fan of the franchise. He doesn't even like Friday the 13th. When he wrote this script, he wanted to basically make an entirely different movie and just throw Jason in there. And yet, somehow, through editing and tweaking and whatnot, he ends up making the best Friday the 13th movie. It's so crazy that someone that doesn't like it makes the best, and yet you have Jason Goes to Hell, which is written by a guy who says he is a diehard fan of the franchise, and that movie is a piece of shit. So it's like interesting how this stuff works out, you know.
It's, you know, those two, you know, in the previous one you're talking about Jason Lives, right, Part 6. It was funny because when you hear that director in interviews and stuff like that, and I kind of respect what he was getting at, because he, you know, I don't remember if it was Return to Crystal Lake or it might have been the DVD documentaries, but he said he wanted to put a little bit of humor in the scenes, you know, kind of like when the kids would say, you know, what were you going to be when you grew up, you know? And I kind of like that, because it's like what it does is it lightens the mood, and then boom, when Jason strikes, you're like, holy fuck, I wasn't expecting that, you know? So I kind of dig that a little bit. But yeah, Jason Goes to Hell, that is definitely fascinating, because I've seen that guy in numerous interviews, the director for that one, and it goes back to the other films we've been mentioning. It's like you didn't know what the hell you were doing. You know, I respect you're trying to be different, fine, you know, but at the end of the day, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Leave it alone. Just give us Jason, you know, and give us something decent, where this will, if anything, the explosion in the beginning of that movie, that should have been the ending.
Yes, that should have been the ending.
Blow him up. I mean, he's never been blown up. He's been shot at. Mm-hmm. He's never been blown up. And blow him up. And I mean, I would definitely put bombs, tear gas, whatever you can get your hands on. Just not annihilate Jason. That's how you would do it. And I think a better story would be is you actually hire an elite SWAT team to go after Jason. That should have been the entire movie. And then instead of the Duke, because the Duke didn't really have a backstory, that should have been Tommy Jarvis. And then that could have been your entire movie for Jason Goes to Hell. And that would have been really neat. But I don't know. That one's really fascinating. But yeah, I love Part 6, Jason Lives. But also I love the Kane Hodder ones too. The telepathic girl, or Part 7 where she can move things. Yeah. I have a kind of a guilty pleasure for that one a little bit, but I do see why that one gets kind of panned a little bit, just because it is a little silly, But other than that, yeah.
The thing about Part 7, though, is Part 7 has the best looking Jason of the entire series. The Part 7 Jason, where you can see his bones are sticking out, his flesh is rotted. That I have a 18-inch statue of that Jason from NECA. NECA makes a lot of memorabilia, and I have an 18-inch statue from Jason sitting in my office here next to me. But I think the movie itself, I like it. I mean, because I like Friday the 13th, but it's silly that she's got telekinesis powers and whatnot. But I thought it was a good movie. But hey, I like Part 8. Part 8 is critically shammed as probably the worst, besides maybe Jason X and Friday the 13th. Of the original 8 movies, I think people say Part 8 is probably the worst of the bunch. And I actually think, for me, it's probably top 2, 3. I really like Part 8. It's campy, it's silly, but I don't know. I enjoy it. So it's all what you like, man. There's nothing wrong with liking something different than everybody else. I make a habit of doing that.
Oh, yeah.
I make a habit of liking movies that people don't like. I remember a couple weeks ago I mentioned Ex Machina on the show. Remember I was talking about that movie with the artificial intelligence, whatever, and I was listening to Pop Culture Leftovers. I think it was last week. I know I mentioned them on the show a lot, but they're buddies of mine. I was listening to them, and they were talking on the show how I shit all over that movie, whatever, and they're like, I can't believe it. Why does this guy not like this movie? And it's kind of funny though, because I mentioned Ex Machina is predictable, and one of the guys on the show, Jake, he's like, isn't that the guy who likes professional wrestling? What's more predictable than professional wrestling? I was like, oh, okay, you got me on that one, man. I'm not gonna say shit back to that, but it goes back to the thing though. It's all subjective. It's all what you like. They like Ex Machina. I think the movie's horrible. I like professional wrestling because it's great. I don't care what they say. But Friday the 13th, I mean, it's kind of hit or miss with you ask people. Some people love it for what it is, and some people think that Friday the 13th is probably the low brow of horror films. It's just it's garbage. It's tasteless. It's whatever. I think it's great, man. I love the franchise, but I accept it for what it is. It's a movie to me that I can pop in and have fun watching, and that's all I ask for my movies. I want to be entertained.
Exactly. I remember we went to the theater, and once again, this is permission for anybody to kick me in the balls, but we went to the theater to see Jason 10, Jason Goes to Space.
8 times.
And God bless my friends, man. Anyone that puts up with me, they went with me, and they knew it was going to be a piece of shit, and they knew I wanted to see it. And I remember we went to go see another movie a month before that, a whole bunch of us, and they showed a trailer for Jason 10, and there were people behind us laughing at the trailer. And there was this, I remember this like it was yesterday. There was this old lady behind me, and her exact words were, "Oh my God, he's in space now." And That right there is a clue that this is going to be a piece of shit. And I was just like, I want to see it. So I'm like, all right, let's go see. Josh wants to go see Jason 10. It's like we'll see whatever the fuck you guys want for the next 6 months. I just want to see Jason 10.
Dude, I'm with you, man.
See this thing.
I'm with you, dude. I don't know if you know this, but Jason X actually was in like development hell as far as like releasing it. The movie was completed, but New Line Cinema didn't want to release the movie in theaters because they knew that it was garbage. So this movie actually got held back over a year after being completed. They never released it in theaters until much later, and finally they just threw it out there and said, fuck it, here you go. This is how, you think that's bad, dude. This is how bad I get. I paid $60 to some guy over the internet. This is going back quite a few years. This is before internet big craze. This is AOL days. I paid $60 for a guy to send me a VHS copy of a bootleg of Jason X that somehow he got a hold of. So I watched the bootleg copy of this movie that I paid $60 for at home. This movie comes out in theaters about 5 months later. I go and see the fucker 8 times in the theater, and I know it's a piece of shit every time I'm watching it, but I still fucking go. The novelty to me of seeing Friday 13th in the theater again, because it had been so long since I had seen it by that point, I went 8 times, and I fucking brought my friends to see it to the opening day, the first show, and then I brought some different friends that night to go see it. I made my dad go see it with me a couple days later on a Sunday. I mean, I saw this movie so many times in theater. Keep in mind, I have a bootleg that I paid $60 for at home, and I still went to the show and seen this shit, dude. I have something wrong with me. It's official.
No, dude, that's perfectly. The 8 times in the theater, I think that's like wow. But other than that, dude, I'm right there with you, bro. I mean, if there's a film I really, because I have a little bit of anxiety for a film. If it's out there in the ether and I really want to see it, I fucking want to see it. So you doing that eBay thing or whatever you did, I'm right there with you, man. I just, it's kind of fascinating though. We were talking about Jason Goes to Hell, even Part 8, New York, Jason Goes to Hell, and then Jason 10 or X. One of the things that I know how you feel, man, about Jason versus Freddy, but the one thing you definitely have to praise Jason versus Freddy is the fact that they put Jason back in the camp.
Yes.
They put him back home.
Thank God.
And he was back in the camp land. He wasn't in some bizarre universe, he was back, home where he belonged. And, there was many thanks to, Freddy and then that little story of theirs. But other than that, I mean, yeah, Jason 10 was, and I remember I watched the making of on that DVD, and they went through, they went just not developing hell. They were trying to figure out what they want to do with the next movie. They were going to put him in Africa. They were going to put him here, Leprechaun was in the hood. There was a bunch of different things that they were going to do with Jason. And, I think what's remarkable is, I don't know. I find it amazing or remarkable the fact that how they try to be overly experimental with a character that works from the original. Just leave it the way it is. Just do the campground. If I would do anything, leave it alone for about 3 to 5 years, and then release it. Then make a new one. Let the people wait for it. Like, I could really go for. These are hardcore fans. I could really go for another Freddy movie or another, Friday 13th movie, and all of a sudden, boom, they're announcing it. And the fans really want to see it. I mean, but it's like, why put him in space? Why have him bounce body to body to body, and stuff like that? He doesn't have to do that. He's Jason with a hockey mask and a machete or an axe. Done. Yeah. So. Yeah, I always find it fascinating how they want to be all experimental with this character.
Yeah, man, it's that old story. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It works just the way it is. People go there, they know what to expect, and that's what they want. You don't need to put them in space, and you don't need to do anything crazy with the character. Please, God, don't put him in the hood like they did Leprechaun. I mean, just let him go to the camp. Let him go to the camp and kill kids. That's all we want from it. It's a good popcorn flick. It's a feel-good movie for people that like horror films, and that's all you want, man. Give me 90 minutes of Jason killing people, and then that's it. I mean, if you want to add something extra to the camp story, by all means, do what you can. If you want to give me a good story, by all means, I'll accept it. But don't take him space. Don't make him eat people's hearts and turn into a different person and not be Jason and all this goofy shit. Don't do it. Just leave it alone. But
hell, I'll even give you this. I'll even give you this much. With Jason 10 taking him to space, kind of like an Alien 3 thing. Have an astronaut crash land in the Camp Crystal Lake, and this person has to survive. With a couple of refugees or kids or camp counselors and shit like that. And you have this one being that's, you get this subplot of this person trying to figure out where they're at and where they were going, blah, blah, blah. It's like a whole story in itself. And then we throw Jason in there. There you go. You can do that. Because he's still in the land. You still got the old elements. And you throw a little bit of extra in there for flavor, because that's what you're going for. Yeah, I don't know.
Even that's better than Jason X, man.
Exactly. Oh my God, there's a lot of things out there better than Jason X.
All right, Josh. Well, man, hey, man, it's been a fun countdown here. Anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap this show up? Because we're about 2.5 hours, give or take, here. So, anything else you want to talk about? Or?
Wow, man.
Hey, man, time flies when you're talking movies.
Yeah, it does, man. It does. I think we're pretty good, and I think we had a good time talking about these films. Like I said before, the horror genre is definitely my favorite genre. It's definitely something I always get into. I had opportunities in film with other genres, drama at that, but yeah, horror is definitely my favorite. And
mine too.
Had a good time. Yeah, the only thing I'm gonna mention is we're starting production this coming Saturday. We had a big production meeting yesterday, and this is something that we're already passing emails with Warner Brothers peeps to see. And it's still in the pitching stages, but definitely want to see where we can take it. And so we're doing production this coming Saturday on the 7th.
And that's on your superhero project you're working on, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. That's the superhero one. That you saw the sketches on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all that good jazz. Mm-hmm.
And can you just real quick, you want to remind everybody where they can find you on like Facebook and all that, in case they want to follow progress on this short film that's starting?
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely find. I reformatted my name, so you can definitely find me anywhere under Joshua Maxim Hall. You can find me under Joshua M. Hall. So yeah, go to any of the top ones. I'm definitely on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So you can definitely find any of those things, like I said before, like Joshua Maxim Hall or Joshua M. Hall, just the way it sounds. And yeah, just find me and definitely check out my stuff, show some support, like, comment, whatever your thing is. And then I'm a total chatty guy on these things, so I'm always happy to talk. I'm happy to talk with new people and interact, in any way possible. So yeah, definitely hit me up.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, guys, reach out to Josh on Facebook, Twitter, all that. I mean, as always, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. It's Matthew Cichella, Cichella. But always, first thing and foremost, go and join our Never Submit podcast group on Facebook. A lot of conversations always happening there. It's funny as hell, some of the things people post. Great time. Otherwise, guys, we'll be back next week. We'll be back to the traditional format, buy or sell. What's opening that week, what are you watching, all that good stuff. Probably have a review on Ash vs. the Evil Dead. I believe that premiered last night. I have not had a chance to watch that yet, but I will today. Review that on next week's show and whatever else I got a chance to watch. I think I've watched a couple movies I got to review next week. I watched The Gift, The Guest, and Vacation. So I'll review those briefly next week on the show and whatever else comes to mind in the next week. So apologies to our listeners, guys. Sorry that this show is going up a little bit later than usual, but there was scheduling conflicts, but we still wanted to get you a show and And I had a good time, Josh, today with you going over horror movies, man. This was a lot of fun. I really thought the podcast would probably be about an hour and a half or so, but we're about 2.5 hours, and honestly, I feel like I could talk much longer about horror films. I could talk all day, but I think my wife might kill me, so I better go ahead and wrap things up here, man. So, but again, it's been a good time, and I thank everybody for listening. I hope everybody enjoyed the top 10 countdown. And if you did, let us know. Send me a tweet on Twitter, send Josh a tweet, comment on Facebook. Let us know if you like these top 10 countdowns or top five countdowns. We can do more stuff like this. We just don't know if everybody likes it or not. So if you do, let us know. Leave a comment or something. Go on iTunes or something. Let us know so we can. I enjoy these, so I would like to do more. But if people don't like them, then I have no way of knowing. So. Otherwise, hey,
let us know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, let us know. We want your feedback. Subscribe on iTunes if you haven't already. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Never Submit Podcast. We appreciate your support and hope you enjoyed the show. We want to hear from you. Send your feedback, questions, and ideas to neversubmitpodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe on iTunes. You'll never miss the show. Also, be sure to like our page on Facebook at facebook.com/neversubmitpodcast and visit our website at neversubmitent.com. Thanks again for listening to the Never Submit Podcast.